Something soft is stirring in the quiet tonight, a story that feels like it has been waiting just for you. We want you to know before anything else that you are loved here. Truly. You are cared for deeply, even in the quiet corners of the night. You've carried so much today, and you deserve to rest now in peace and gentleness. We'll hold this story for you like a lantern in the dark, guiding you softly forward. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now grab your coffee and let's get started. The void was not empty, though at first glance it seemed so. Morty floated as though wrapped in a blanket of silence, his breath the only sound he could hear. There was no ground beneath his feet, no sky above his head, only an endless drift of shadow and faint shimmer. It was a place that carried no sense of time, no sense of before or after, only the continuous present that stretched on like a slow lullaby. And yet, for all its vastness, the void felt strangely alive. Morty could not see what breathed within it, but he could feel it, a subtle pulse, as if the space around him had a heartbeat. He drifted slowly, not walking, not flying, just carried. He thought of how, when he was younger, he used to lie in bed on summer nights and imagine what it might be like to float through space. Not the loud, chaotic kind of space his grandfather dragged him into with gadgets and portals and endless shouting, but a quiet one. One where stars hummed like crickets and the air was filled with nothing but stillness. It almost made him smile, remembering those nights, remembering the way he tried to stretch himself into the calm, even when the world around him was restless. Now he was here, in a place that matched the dreams he once had, though it was lonelier than he imagined. A faint sound stirred. At first it was almost nothing, like the brushing of air against his ear. Then slowly it formed into something more, a hum, delicate and broken, but steady. Morty tilted his head, unsure if it was truly sound, or just something inside him. The hum wove through the stillness like a thread. He could not make out a melody, but the cadence was soft, familiar in a way that made his chest ache. He thought of lullabies he used to hear when he was much smaller, the kind his mother sang when she believed he was already asleep. Her voice was never perfectly in tune, but it carried warmth, a promise that the night was safe. The void now carried something like that, a lull, a reminder that he was not entirely abandoned here. He let the hum carry him. Each note seemed to stretch into the next with no sharp edge, no demand to move faster. In that gentleness, he began to remember things he had long tucked away. The feel of an old blanket against his skin, frayed at the edges. The smell of toast on mornings when Rick was still asleep, before the chaos of machines and arguments filled the kitchen. The sound of summer laughing from another room, not at him, but near him. The kind of laugh that said the world was still bright in places. These little fragments rose up like lanterns from the dark, floating slowly around him, and he reached for them with the soft ache of longing. The hum grew fainter, though it did not disappear. Instead, it became part of the silence, woven into the fabric of the void itself. Morty wondered if this was how memory worked, not as a picture you could hold forever, but as a feeling stitched into the quiet, surfacing only when the heart was still enough to notice. He whispered into the vastness, not even sure what he wanted to say. Maybe nothing at all. His words melted into the dark, but something seemed to listen anyway. That listening alone was enough to steady him. A shimmer appeared to his left, not a star but something closer, smaller. He turned slowly and saw a pale glow drifting like a feather caught in a breeze. It wasn't bright, just a flicker, but it moved with intention as though it was aware of him. Morty reached out, hesitating for a moment, afraid it might vanish. Yet the glow did not retreat. It hovered, circling him in quiet arcs before settling at his side like a tiny lantern. The warmth it cast was subtle, barely touching his skin, but it was real. He sighed with relief, not because it solved anything, but because it was company. He floated with the lantern at his side, letting it light the way forward, though there was no forward to see. The void remained endless, unbroken, yet the presence of the glow made it feel less hollow. Every so often, the lantern pulsed, as though in rhythm with his breathing. When he grew tense, it dimmed, but when he let go, it brightened. It was as if the lantern was teaching him how to rest, how to stop grasping for answers and simply drift. Morty didn't understand it, but he didn't need to. Not here. He thought of Rick again, though the memory did not come with sharpness. He pictured the old man tinkering with wires, muttering under his breath, swearing at the smallest setbacks. Morty used to feel nervous around that constant storm of energy, but now, in the quiet of the void, he remembered something different. He remembered how Rick's hand, rough and impatient, had once steadied his shoulder when he thought he might fall. He remembered how Rick, in his own messy way, tried to shield him from certain truths, even though he failed more often than not. Maybe the lantern reminded him of Rick, too, not in the noise, not in the chaos, but in that hidden thread of care that Morty often missed. The hum returned, louder now, as though it had been waiting for him to find calm. It wrapped around him like a song with no words, only warmth. He realized he was no longer afraid of the void. It wasn't a trap, it wasn't punishment, it was simply a place to pause. Maybe even a place to heal. He let his eyelids lower, even though he wasn't sure sleep was possible here. Still, the act of closing his eyes softened the weight he carried. The lantern stayed near, its glow brushing against his skin, steady and patient. Memories rose and faded like tides. He saw his younger self running barefoot on grass, felt the cool sting of morning dew. He remembered the weight of books he never finished, the scribbles in margins where he tried to make sense of impossible worlds. He thought of the first time he held someone's hand, and how clumsy and trembling it had been, yet how right it felt. None of these things mattered here, and yet all of them did. They were pieces of him, small kindnesses, small moments of being alive. The void seemed to cradle them with care, as though saying, "These too are enough." Time, if it existed at all, stretched. Morty drifted in and out of thought, carried by the hum, guided by the lantern. The vastness did not change, and yet he felt different within it, quieter, softer, as though he was learning how to rest for the first time. He breathed slowly, each exhale blending into the space around him, as if the void itself was exhaling with him. He whispered once more, though not to call out for anyone, just to say thank you. Thank you to the hum, to the lantern, to the stillness itself. The words dissolved into the dark, but he imagined they were heard, carried off like seeds. On a breeze, he didn't need to know where they landed. It was enough to let them go. And so he floated, not lost, not found, but gently held in the lull of the void. Somewhere far beyond, the echoes of a family, a home, and a life continued. But here he was, simply a boy wrapped in silence, accompanied by light. The glow of the lantern stayed beside him, steady and gentle, a companion in the endless drift. Morty watched it circle, as if it had a mind of its own, always returning to him no matter how far it floated away. He began to wonder if it was guiding him somewhere, though the void had no landmarks, no path to follow. Still, its presence carried a kind of direction, not in space but in feeling, as though the lantern's true purpose was to lead him inward, deeper into himself. He let his body drift without resistance, no longer straining to make sense of the emptiness. The silence was no longer heavy. It felt soft now, like a quilt stretched over the night sky. With each passing moment, the lantern's glow seemed to brighten, though it never became harsh. It glowed the way fireflies do in summer, gentle, patient, reminding him of nights spent outside when the air smelled of grass and warm soil. He thought of catching those tiny lights in a jar, of holding them close, only to let them go again. Maybe this lantern was the same, a light not meant to be owned, only walked beside. As Morty followed, the hum from before returned, faint but steady. He realized it was not coming from outside him at all, but from within. It was his own memory humming back, a tune without words, a lullaby made of fragments he barely remembered. Perhaps his mother's voice had planted it there, or perhaps it had always been waiting inside him like a small seed carried through the years. Now the lantern seemed to draw it out, letting the song rise again. The void around him shimmered in response. Slowly, a shape formed in the distance. It was not a star or a planet, but something closer, smaller, glowing like glass touched by moonlight. Morty drifted nearer, his heart unsure but calm. The shape revealed itself as a lantern too, but different, taller, older, its light dimmer, as if it had been burning for centuries. He reached out a trembling hand, half expecting it to vanish, but the lantern remained, floating steady before him. Its surface reflected not his face, but flashes of memory. Memory. He saw himself as a small child, holding on to his mother's hand, refusing to let go as they crossed a crowded street. He saw himself sitting alone in his room, clutching a toy spaceship, pretending he could soar away from all the noise in the house. He saw himself crying quietly after an argument with Rick, when words had been thrown too hard, and apologies never arrived. These images flickered across the lantern like shadows, but they did not hurt him. Instead, they felt like acknowledgments, as though the void itself was whispering, "Yes, these happened, and still, you are here." Morty let his hand rest against the lantern, though he could not feel its surface. Instead, he felt warmth spreading through him, a reminder that memory does not vanish, it only softens with time. The smaller lantern at his side pulsed brighter, as if celebrating the meeting. For a moment, Morty closed his eyes, letting the two lights surround him. He did not know why the void had given him this gift, but he accepted it, grateful for something to hold in a place that seemed endless. He drifted further, carrying both lanterns now, the small one like a friend, the older one like a mentor. The hum grew stronger, weaving around him in waves, and he realized he was not alone in his drifting. Shapes appeared faintly in the distance, other lanterns, dozens of them, floating like stars within reach. Each one carried its own flicker, its own story, its own pulse of memory. Morty wondered if they belonged to others who had drifted here before, if each light was a fragment of someone's life, gently preserved in this endless quiet. The thought did not frighten him. Instead, it made him feel connected, part of something larger than himself. He approached one of the distant lanterns. This one flickered more weakly than the others, as though it was struggling to remain lit. Morty hesitated, then cupped his hands around it, though he could not truly touch. The small glow at his side pulsed, lending some of its brightness, and the weak lantern steadied. Morty smiled faintly. Maybe that was all any of them needed. Not grand gestures, not impossible answers, but the sharing of a little light. As he floated among the lanterns, he began to notice they formed patterns. Some clustered together like constellations, others drifted alone. He remembered nights spent with Rick in faraway galaxies, pointing out stars, though Rick had always spoken with impatience, dismissing myths and stories. Yet Morty had secretly loved the idea of constellations, shapes drawn in the sky that carried meaning, even if they were only connections imagined by human eyes. Now, among these lanterns, he drew shapes of his own. A line of lights reminded him of a hand reaching outward. Another cluster shaped itself into what looked like a door. The patterns calmed him, reminding him that even in emptiness the mind finds meaning, and that meaning can bring comfort. He lingered before one lantern that shone brighter than the rest. Within it, he saw not just memories, but feelings. A sense of belonging, of sitting at a table with family, of laughing even when food spilled and arguments hovered. A warmth filled him, and tears touched the corner of his eyes, though they did not fall. The lantern did not show perfection. It showed realness, the simple truth of being alive with others. That was enough. Morty drifted on, carrying the hum, the two lanterns, and the quiet lessons they brought. The void no longer felt like a place of exile, but like a pause in time, a space where one could rest and remember. The younger lantern beside him pulsed with rhythm, and he began to match his breathing to it. Inhale, glow, brighter. Exhale, grow softer. He found himself calming more deeply, the weight of fear loosening its grip. He spoke again, softly, into the stillness. If anyone's listening, I think I'm okay. Not perfect, but okay. His words floated outward, not demanding response. He imagined they became another lantern, drifting somewhere into the distance, carrying his small truth with them. Eventually, his eyes grew heavy, though he was not truly tired. He simply felt ready to rest. The lanterns remained around him, a gentle constellation, keeping watch. He curled into himself, floating as though lying on an invisible bed, and the hum rocked him like a cradle. His last thought before slipping into quiet was that perhaps the void was not here to take from him, but to give him time, to let him find stillness in a way he never could back home. The lanterns pulsed one last time, their lights breathing in unison. Morty let go, not into fear, but into peace. The void shifted gently around him, as though it had grown aware of his rest. Morty floated within it, not asleep, not awake, but caught in that liminal space where thoughts blur into dreams. The lantern still glowed in their slow orbit, their lights patient and steady. They seemed content to wait, as though they had been waiting for centuries already. When Morty stirred, their glow did not flicker in surprise, but hummed softly, welcoming him back into their silent company. He stretched, though his body did not need it, and found himself remembering what it felt like to wake on summer mornings, back home. The air was warm, the light through the curtains was golden, and for a moment the world was soft before the day began. He thought of lying still in that half-sleep, listening to birds call faintly outside, and wondering how long he could linger before Rick's voice came crashing into the morning with demands and inventions. Here there was no such voice, only the slow patience of the void. It reminded him of those mornings stretched infinitely, untouched by responsibility. As he drifted, he noticed something new. The space around him shimmered, not with lanterns, this time, but with a hazy glow, as if the void itself was weaving a memory. Slowly, shapes formed, not solid, but outlines of familiar things. A porch swing creaked in the faint breeze. The smell of grass and soil rose as though summer had bloomed inside the emptiness. Morty blinked, surprised by how real it felt. He was back in the yard of his childhood, though the house behind him was only a silhouette, half remembered, half forgotten. He heard the sound of crickets, the gentle rhythm of nighttime life. It wasn't loud, it wasn't sharp, it was steady, soothing, like the heartbeat of summer itself. Morty sat down on the shimmering swing, though it did not truly exist. Still it carried his weight, rocking forward and back with the faintest creak. He let himself sway, the lanterns hovering nearby, their light blending with the warm glow of memory. The air held the scent of something sweet, lemonade, maybe. His chest tightened with nostalgia at the thought of warm evenings spent sipping from cold glasses, condensation dripping down onto his hands. He remembered how his mother would place the drink in front of him without asking, a quiet gesture of care that never needed words. He hadn't thought of that in years. It was so small, so ordinary, yet here in the void it felt like treasure. A faint laugh echoed. Morty turned, startled, but saw no one. It was not Rick's laugh, not Summer's, not anyone's he could place. It was the sound of joy itself, carried on the evening air, familiar but unclaimed. It stirred something deep within him. He realized that joy was not always tied to people, not always dependent on a specific memory. Sometimes it existed on its own, scattered through the world, waiting to be remembered. The swing carried him slowly forward, the crickets sang, and Morty found himself humming again. The wordless tune matched the rhythm of the night, blending with the sounds around him until he could not tell where his voice ended and the world began. The lantern at his side pulsed with every note, keeping time. For the first time since arriving in the void, Morty felt as though he was not wandering at all. He was home, not in a place, but in a feeling. The memory shifted. The glow of summer darkened into twilight, and above him stars began to bloom across the sky. They appeared one by one, tiny sparks that stretched into countless constellations. Morty tilted his head back, staring at the vast spread of light. He remembered nights spent lying on the roof of the garage, staring at those same stars, imagining what lay beyond them. Rick had always insisted he knew the answers, had shown Morty galaxies, planets, and realms that dwarfed Earth in every way. And yet Morty realized the stars back home still carried their magic. Even knowing the vastness of the cosmos, there had been something comforting in simply gazing upward, imagining, wondering. He traced the stars above with his finger, connecting them into shapes only he could see. A crooked line became the outline of a lantern. A curve of light turned into the swing beneath him. He smiled faintly. Perhaps the sky had always been a mirror, reflecting back the shapes we carried within. A gentle breeze stirred, carrying with it the faintest whisper. Morty froze, listening. The words were not clear, not even formed, but the feeling was unmistakable. Care. The whisper was not a message, not instruction, only reassurance. He didn't know where it came from, his own mind, the lanterns, or the void itself, but it wrapped around him like a soft blanket. He leaned back into the swing, closing his eyes. The stars above pulsed faintly, keeping rhythm with his breathing. He felt smaller than them, but not insignificant. Instead, he felt part of them, as though his own heartbeat was just another flicker in the great constellation of life. For the first time, he did not feel the need to search for Rick, or for answers, or for escape. He was content to simply be here, now, in this quiet summer that belonged to him alone. When he opened his eyes, the vision had softened. The swing faded, the yard blurred, and the stars dissolved back into lanterns. The void returned, endless and still, yet Morty carried the warmth of what he had seen. The memory lingered in him, like the aftertaste of sweetness, impossible to hold, but impossible to forget. The lantern beside him glowed brighter, as though pleased with what he had remembered. Morty reached toward it, whispering softly, "Thanks." His voice cracked, but the lantern pulsed in reply, steady and calm. It was not an answer, but it was enough. He drifted onward, no longer anxious about the direction. The void would carry him where it wished, and he trusted it now. Every so often, echoes of the summer returned. Crickets in the distance, the creak of the swing, the taste of lemonade. They appeared like gentle reminders, nudging him toward rest whenever his thoughts grew heavy. Eventually, Morty curled into himself again, the lantern resting near his chest like a small sun. The hum of memory returned, blending with the silence until they were one. He breathed slowly, eyelids heavy, body weightless. The void rocked him like the swing, steady and patient, until he sank once more into quiet peace. Morty drifted deeper, carried by the patience of the void. The lantern at his side remained faithful, a small ember in an endless night. He began to wonder if this light had always belonged to him, if it had been waiting quietly within since childhood, hidden under fear and noise, now free to glow in the silence. Each flicker reminded him of home, not in detail, but in essence. The warmth of belonging, the hush of someone caring even when words failed. As he moved, the dark around him shifted in quiet waves, like ripples on a pond. In the shifting, he began to sense something new. A figure stirred in the distance, not solid, not fully formed, more shadow than shape. Morty's breath caught, though he did not feel afraid. The void seemed to assure him that what he saw was not danger, but memory made flesh. The figure resolved slowly. White hair caught the glow of the lantern, shoulders hunched beneath the weight of a long coat. Morty's chest tightened. Even here, in this place of quiet, he recognized the outline of Rick. Not loud, not slouched at the workbench, not snapping insults or rushing through portals, just standing still, waiting. Morty floated closer, his voice caught in his throat. The figure of Rick did not move, did not speak. It remained a shadow, an impression carved from memory. Yet the silence between them was not empty. Morty felt the weight of years pressing softly against him, all the unspoken things, the quiet gestures hidden behind noise. He remembered nights, when Rick had stayed awake in the garage, tinkering long after everyone had gone to bed. He remembered mornings when Rick had wordlessly slid a plate of food across the table, grumbling but ensuring Morty ate. He remembered, above all, the one time Rick had wrapped his coat around Morty's shoulders when the night grew too cold, saying nothing as he did. The lantern beside Morty flickered, casting its glow on the shadow. For an instant, the figure seemed more real, more alive. Morty wanted to reach out, but he hesitated. He knew this was not truly Rick. It was an echo, a shape of love hidden in memory. and yet that made it no less true. Sometimes echoes held more truth than words ever could. He whispered, his voice fragile in the stillness. I didn't always get it. You were loud and scary, and you didn't always say the right things, but I think you cared. His words wavered, but once released, they softened into the void. The figure did not answer, but Morty felt a warmth bloom in his chest. The lantern pulsed brighter, as though acknowledging his truth. The figure of Rick slowly faded, dissolving back into shadow. Morty did not panic, did not reach to hold it. He let it go, understanding that the memory had come only to remind him of what was already his. Rick was not here, not truly, but the care Morty had felt was real. That was enough to carry forward. He drifted onward, quieter now, the lantern steady beside him. The void shifted again, and this time a new image formed. A table appeared, glowing faintly in the darkness. Upon it sat small, ordinary objects, ones Morty recognized immediately. A sandwich wrapped in foil, a half-scribbled notebook, a set of dice from a game he once played with friends. Each item glowed with its own faint halo, as though the void had chosen to display fragments of his life, not for their grandeur, but for their simplicity. Morty reached toward the sandwich first. The foil crinkled softly beneath his fingers, though it wasn't truly there. He remembered the taste of one. His mother had made for him on a rushed morning, the way she had placed it in his hand without pausing, too busy to speak, but caring enough to give. He remembered, too, how Rick had once slapped together a messy version when no one else was around, muttering that food didn't matter as long as it filled you. Both sandwiches were imperfect, yet both carried love hidden in the act. Next, his hand brushed the notebook. The scribbles inside were crooked and uncertain, half-formed ideas he had once written when he thought no one was watching. Dreams of what he might become, questions he couldn't answer, doodles of ships and skies. He smiled faintly, embarrassed even here, yet grateful that the void had kept them. They were pieces of him, proof that he had tried to shape the world. In his own way, even when his voice trembled. Finally he lifted the dice. They glowed faintly between his fingers, carrying laughter from a night-long past. He remembered playing clumsily, fumbling the rules, but laughing so hard with friends that the game itself didn't matter. That memory washed over him like a tide, filling him with warmth. The dice rolled silently from his hand, scattering across the void, their glow lingering like falling stars. Morty sat at the table of objects, lantern glowing near his shoulder, and realized something simple, yet profound. His life was not built on grand adventures or impossible inventions, though those existed. It was made of sandwiches, notebooks, laughter, coats draped quietly across his shoulders. It was built from small acts, quiet moments. These were the true constellations of memory, brighter than galaxies, because they were his. The void dimmed around him, leaving only the glow of the table. Morty closed his eyes, resting his hands on its surface. He whispered again, softer this time. "Thanks for all of it, even the small things." His voice trembled, but it carried the weight of truth. The lantern pulsed, the objects glowed brighter, and then, like fading candles, they dissolved into the dark. Morty felt no sadness as they vanished. Instead, he felt lighter, as though the memories had not been taken, but absorbed into him. He carried them now, stitched into his very being. The lantern at his side dimmed for a moment, then brightened again, as if pleased with his acceptance. He drifted onward, the void once again endless and still. But he no longer feared its silence. Each breath he took echoed with the warmth of sandwiches and notebooks, of dice and laughter, of coats and crickets and small, unnoticed care. He realized that the void was not a place of emptiness at all. It was a mirror, showing him what he had overlooked, what had always been enough. And so he floated, lantern steady, heart quieter than it had ever been. The silence was no longer silence. It was love, woven into the fabric of the night. The lantern glowed gently, its flame steady, as Morty drifted deeper through the quiet vastness. The dark no longer pressed on him as it once had. It now felt like an endless canvas, waiting to show him what he needed to see. He carried no map, no destination, yet his heart no longer worried about where he was going. The void had its own rhythm, and Morty had begun to trust it. Time here was difficult to measure. It could have been minutes or years, or the fragile space between a breath and a sigh. Yet Morty did not grow restless. Instead, he let himself breathe slowly, each inhale and exhale rippling through the silence like gentle waves. The lantern pulsed in time with him, as though it too was alive and listening. After a long stretch of drifting, the void stirred. Shadows shifted into patterns, faint at first, like smudges across glass. Slowly, they sharpened. Morty found himself standing on the edge of a familiar street. The pavement stretched beneath his feet, and streetlights flickered faintly in the distance, but everything was softened, blurred, as though painted from memory rather than lived in reality. He knew this street. He had walked it countless times, shoulders hunched, backpack heavy, eyes downcast. The memory of younger days pressed in around him, days when he trudged home from school, feeling smaller than the world would allow. His voice had cracked in classrooms, his hands had trembled during presentations, and he had often felt invisible, except when he stumbled and drew the wrong kind of attention. The lantern's glow illuminated the ghost of his younger self, standing beneath one of the streetlights, small, awkward, shifting his weight from foot to foot, clutching his books too tightly. Morty froze, watching. The boy did not see him. The boy only looked down at the cracks in the sidewalk, shoulders curled. Inward, inward. Morty's throat ached. He remembered the heaviness of those afternoons, the endless worry that he would never be enough, never strong enough, never clever enough. He wanted to step forward, to tell his younger self that none of that silence, none of that shame would last forever. But he held back, realizing the void was not asking him to fix the past. It was only asking him to see it. The boy eventually moved on, fading into the distance. Morty followed, lantern in hand, the scene shifting around him. The street dissolved, replaced by the interior of his room. Posters hung crookedly on the walls. A desk sat cluttered with half-finished assignments, pens scattered across its surface. On the bed sat the younger Morty again, knees pulled to his, chest staring at the floor. Morty stepped closer this time, letting the lantern's glow brush against the memory. He remembered those nights too well, the way the quiet had felt suffocating, the way doubts grew louder when no one else was around. He wanted to reach across the space, to offer comfort to the boy on the bed. But as he lifted the lantern, he realized something. The boy's shadow shifted when the light touched him, stretching into something softer. The room did not grow brighter, yet the boy seemed less alone. It struck Morty that even back then, though he hadn't seen it, the light had always been with him. Maybe faint, maybe hidden, but never gone. He whispered, almost to himself, "You weren't as lost as you thought. You just couldn't see the light yet." The younger version of himself did not respond, but Morty felt a weight ease in his chest. The lantern pulsed gently, approving of the recognition. The scene dissolved again. This time, Morty stood in the middle of a field. Grass swayed around him, touched by a breeze that came from nowhere. The sky above was neither day nor night, only a soft, in-between glow. Ahead of him, he saw silhouettes, not shadows this time, but people moving in quiet harmony. He recognized them. His family, distant yet unmistakable. His mother's shape, his father's outline, his sister walking just behind. Their movements were ordinary, setting a table, passing dishes, talking, quietly, but the ordinariness itself glowed like a hidden treasure. Morty's breath caught. He had taken so many of those moments for granted. Dinner after long days, conversations half listened to, the sound of his sister complaining while still sitting near him. All so ordinary, yet each one now shimmered with meaning in the void. He stepped closer, lantern casting a wide circle of light. The silhouettes turned toward him, not fully visible, yet warm in their presence. For the first time, Morty did not feel like a stranger looking in. He felt like he belonged to them, even here in the silence. His chest swelled with something he had not often allowed himself to feel, a quiet gratitude. "I didn't always notice," he whispered, voice unsteady. "But you were there." And that mattered. The silhouettes did not reply. They didn't need to. Their outlines faded back into the field, leaving Morty standing alone. But the warmth remained, settled into his bones. The field shifted, unraveling into darkness again. Yet Morty no longer saw the void as emptiness. Each vision, each memory, had shown him that even in silence he had never truly been alone. The lantern glowed brighter now, its flame steady and sure. He drifted again, deeper still, until another image began to form. This time it was not of family, not of his younger self, not of Rick. It was a mirror standing tall in the middle of the dark. Its surface shimmered, reflecting not the void, but Morty himself, as he was now. He stepped toward it cautiously, lantern in hand. The reflection was familiar, slouched shoulders, tired eyes, the same hesitations that had followed him for so long. But as he stared, the reflection shifted. Slowly, the shoulders straightened. The eyes grew steadier, more certain. The lantern in the reflection's hand glowed even brighter than his own. Morty swallowed hard, his heart thundering in the stillness. The mirror was not showing someone else, not an echo or a memory. It was showing what he could become, not perfect, not without fear, but whole. A version of himself who could carry the lantern proudly, who could face the silence without shrinking. He reached out, fingertips brushing the cool surface of the mirror. The reflection raised its hand too, meeting him. For a brief moment, light flooded between them, so bright it filled every corner of the void. Morty closed his eyes, overwhelmed, but he did not pull away. He let the light wash over him, through him, until the mirror dissolved into pure radiance. When the brightness finally dimmed, Morty found himself standing alone again in the endless dark. But he no longer felt small. The lantern by his side burned steadily, and within him a second light glowed quietly, as though the mirror had left its mark. He took a breath, long and calm, and whispered into the silence, "I'm still here, and that's enough." The void gave no answer. It didn't need to. Its silence had become a companion, not an enemy. Morty drifted forward, lantern steady, carrying the light of his memories, his family, his younger self, and the possibility of who he might one day be. And for the first time in a long while, he felt ready to keep going, no matter how far the void stretched. The void carried Morty forward as if it were a river of darkness, each movement slow, deliberate, a rhythm that matched the pulse of his own heart. The lantern glowed softly at his side, steady, patient, a quiet companion that seemed to know him better than any voice ever could. He drifted in silence for a time, breathing with the stillness, letting the hum of memory rise and fall around him. The void had begun to feel less like emptiness and more like a place that could hold him entirely without judgment or expectation. A new light appeared in the distance. It shimmered differently from the lanterns he had carried so far, more delicate, fragile, yet undeniably alive. Morty blinked and found himself drawn toward it, moving as if carried by invisible hands. As he approached, the shape resolved, a figure encased in a pane of clear glass, sitting cross-legged, still, almost like a sculpture, though it was unmistakably alive. The figure was small, childlike, its head bowed slightly. Its hair fell in soft, unkempt strands, and its face was serene, untroubled by the void around it. Morty's chest tightened. The figure did not move when he arrived. It did not speak. Yet something about it made him want to kneel beside it, to offer comfort, to whisper, "You are not alone." He hovered near the glass, unsure what to do. The lantern beside him pulsed, as though encouraging him to reach out, to extend care without expectation. He tried, lifting his hand toward the glass, but his fingers met nothing. The figure did not flinch, did not acknowledge him, yet its presence radiated quiet companionship. Morty realized slowly that he did not need a response. Sometimes care was given without acknowledgement, and sometimes that was enough. He sat across from the figure, letting the lantern's glow fall between them. The void remained silent, except for the gentle hum that had become the rhythm of his journey. He found himself speaking softly, more to the void than to the figure, though his words seemed to touch the glass nonetheless. "I don't know who you are," he said. "I don't know why you're here. But I think you're important." Minutes stretched, perhaps hours. Morty had lost the sense of time long ago, and the void had no concern for it. The figure remained, still serene, a presence so calm it made his chest ache with relief. Morty thought of all the moments in his life when he had longed for someone to sit silently with him, not offering advice or judgment, not trying to fix anything, just being there. This figure, encased in its delicate glass, was that someone. Memories surfaced without warning. He saw himself as a child, crying quietly on the floor after an argument with Rick, or after Summer had scolded him too sharply, or after a friend had left without saying goodbye. He remembered how he had longed for understanding, for gentle presence, for someone to simply notice that he hurt. And now, here in the void, the figure in the glass embodied that quiet companionship he had always needed. The lantern beside him pulsed gently, illuminating the figure's face. Morty leaned closer, and though he could not touch, he felt a connection. The glass seemed not to separate them, but to hold the figure safely, to protect it while allowing him to offer what he could. He whispered again, softly, "I don't know your name, but I see you. I'm here. You're not alone." For the first time, the figure shifted, just slightly, as though acknowledging him without breaking its serene composure. Morty's chest warmed. Even the smallest gesture felt monumental, a reminder that companionship did not always need words or movement. Sometimes it was simply presence, sustained, patient and quiet. He remembered Rick again, not the loud, impatient man, but the rare moments of quiet care. The plate of food slid across the table without comment. The coat draped over trembling shoulders, the brief glance that said, "I notice you." The figure in the glass carried the same essence, distilled into stillness. Morty realized that these small gestures, these tiny moments of recognition, were more powerful than anything else he had ever sought. Time drifted further, and the void around him shifted. The glass cage remained, but the space outside began to bloom with faint, shimmering shapes, flowers made of light, faint trails of color, lanterns rising and falling gently like tides. The world of the void felt alive in a subtle way, responding to Morty's attention, his care, his presence. He noticed that every movement he made, every soft word he spoke, seemed to influence the faint ripples around him. His presence mattered here, in the quietest way. He leaned back slightly, watching the figure in the glass, feeling a calm settle over him. The void had no threat here, no rush, no expectation. There was only the slow, deliberate unfolding of quiet care. Morty realized that he had been seeking something like this all his life. Companionship not tied to necessity, not dependent on reward, not even dependent on recognition. Simply being present with another, honoring their existence, was enough. He whispered once more, this time barely audible, "I'll stay with you as long as you need." The figure remained still, serene, but Morty felt a gentle warmth radiate from it, subtle but undeniable, like the quiet exhale of someone relieved to be seen. He smiled faintly, feeling a sense of purpose he had not realized he had been missing. His journey through the void was not only about discovering himself, but about learning to care and learning to witness care in return. Minutes or hours, though Morty could not tell, passed, and the void seemed to breathe with them. The flowers of light shifted gently, lanterns rose and fell in rhythm, and the hum of memory carried softly beneath it all. Morty felt his shoulders relax for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The weight of his worries, his fears, his past mistakes had not disappeared entirely, but they had lessened. The void held him with patience, and he, in turn, held the figure. Finally, he leaned back fully, letting the lantern's glow wash over them both. He realized that he could not rescue the figure, could not fix it or change it, but he did not need to. Being here, being present, was enough. The void had taught him that care was not always about action, and love was not always about expression. Sometimes it was about witnessing, sharing space, and allowing another to exist fully without interference. Morty exhaled slowly, a quiet release that felt almost sacred. He looked at the lantern, then at the figure, and felt something deep settle in his chest. This journey through the void, with all its small revelations, its patient companions, its lessons of light and presence, had begun to shape him in ways he had not expected. He was learning, slowly, that strength did not always come from action or power. It came from patience, from presence, from quiet acknowledgement of life as it was. He whispered once more, soft and sure, "Thank you for letting me be here." The figure in the glass remained still, but Morty could feel a shared recognition, a quiet connection formed without words, without movement, without need. And somewhere, in that silent exchange, he felt a sense of belonging he had rarely experienced before. Morty leaned back, letting the lantern float beside him, the void humming softly. The figure in the glass remained serene, patient, and real enough to matter. And for the first time in a long while, Morty felt the gentle comfort of a companion, not in the chaos of noise, not in the demands of life, but in the quiet stillness that stretched endlessly around them both. He exhaled one last time, soft and slow, letting the calm sink deep into his bones. The void held him, and he held the void in return, with patience, care, and presence. Morty drifted farther into the void, the lantern's warm glow floating alongside him like a faithful companion. Time felt fluid here, stretched thin and pliable, yet he did not mind its slipperiness. Every moment, every breath carried weight, though it was the weight of stillness rather than burden. The silence was soft now, a familiar rhythm, and Morty moved with it, neither pushing forward nor pulling back, simply existing. The void shifted subtly, faint colors bleeding across the darkness, indigo, silver, and the softest hints of lavender. They curled around him like smoke, delicate and unthreatening, and he realized that the void was learning him in a way he could not articulate. Each pulse of light, each wavering hue, seemed attuned to his thoughts, his memories, his quiet desires. Morty felt a gentle awe, not from wonder at the void itself, but from its patience, the way it simply waited for him to notice, to reach inward and outward in turn. He noticed a sound, soft and nearly imperceptible, like distant waves brushing.
Sure.
It was a rhythm he recognized without knowing where it came from, a lullaby half-remembered, a fragment of a voice from his childhood. He closed his eyes and let it fill him, letting it rise and fall, until it became part of his own heartbeat. The lantern beside him pulsed in perfect harmony, casting its glow across the haze of colors and shadows. A shape emerged from the mists, delicate and slow, like fog forming into a tree. Its branches stretched outward, not rigid, but fluid, almost as if they were moving underwater. Morty drifted closer, curious but unafraid. The tree bore no leaves, yet it shimmered faintly, each branch tipped with soft lights that flickered like fireflies. He realized they were memories, floating gently on the edges of each limb, images not bound by time or place. Morty reached toward one of the flickering memories. It was a simple scene, a swing in his backyard, the smell of rain on the grass, the laughter of his sister echoing softly in the distance. He could not touch it, not truly, but he felt the warmth of it, the gentle comfort of having lived it. Another memory drifted along a branch, a sandwich carefully packed by his mother, left at the edge of the table for him to find. Morty smiled faintly. These small, ordinary moments had been sacred, though he had never realized it before. He noticed that the tree seemed alive in response to his attention. Branches bent subtly toward him, lights flickering in time with his heartbeat. Morty realized that the void was not simply holding his memories, it was honoring them. Each flicker of light, each gentle sway was recognition, a quiet validation of the life he had lived, the small moments he had survived. The hum of memory shifted again, carrying a new presence. Morty turned slightly and saw the faint outline of Rick, not the shadow from before, but softer, gentler, as though memory had rewritten him. Rick's face was still weathered, eyes heavy, but the tension that usually clung to his posture was gone. Morty felt his chest tighten. He did not speak at first. Words felt clumsy, inadequate, but he spoke anyway softly.
I think I understand a little more now about you and about me. Rick's figure did not respond, and yet Morty felt acknowledgement. It was subtle, like a nod, just at the edge of perception. Morty's chest loosened. He had spent so much
of his life trying to understand Rick's words, his actions, his intentions, But here, in the quiet of the void, he realized that understanding was not always necessary. Presence, attention, acknowledgement, those were the threads that mattered most. The trees swayed gently, memories brushing against one another. Morty floated through them, letting his mind touch what it could and release what it could not hold. Each memory brought warmth. The first time he had successfully launched a model rocket, the quiet afternoons reading comics alone in his room, the evenings spent stargazing with Rick, where explanations were fewer than observations, yet meaning lingered. He drifted past the tree, following the shimmer of distant light, and found another figure, a younger version of himself, sitting cross-legged on the ground, hands clasped over knees, staring into the void with wide, uncertain eyes. Morty hovered, lantern glowing softly beside him. He did not speak. He did not reach. He simply let the boy exist, holding space for him as the void had done for Morty all this time. The younger Morty trembled slightly, a faint echo of fear and loneliness, yet he did not move away. Morty felt a gentle warmth settle in his chest. He understood now. The boy had always been present, waiting for acknowledgement, for a quiet companion to bear witness to him. Morty whispered softly, "I see you. You're not alone." The boy's eyes widened, then softened, and Morty felt the tiniest pulse of connection. Not understanding, not explanation, just recognition. The void seemed to hum around them, carrying the weight of countless moments that could not be expressed in words. Morty realized that this was the power of quiet care, the ability to hold another's presence without demand, without intervention, simply allowing them to exist fully. The steel lantern pulsed brighter, casting gentle shadows that danced across the void. Morty felt his own heart shift in rhythm with its glow. He understood that his journey through this endless space was not about discovery in the sense of seeking answers, but discovery in the sense of presence, finding the light in himself and others, small as it might be, yet enough to illuminate even the darkest corners. The field of vision shifted slowly, blending the tree, the boy, and the distant shimmer of Rick's presence into a single, flowing tableau. Morty exhaled, a long, soft release that carried relief, gratitude, and quiet awe. He felt connected to everything he had seen, to his memories, his family, his younger self, and even to Rick in ways that words could not capture. The void had shown him the profound truth that care and attention, even in their smallest forms, could be monumental. Finally, Morty curled into himself, letting the lantern drift beside him like a gentle heartbeat. The void hummed softly, a cradle of memory, light, and presence. He let his mind soften, allowing the quiet to seep in, and for the first time in a long while, he did not long for escape. The void was not a prison. It was a space of understanding, of patient companionship, of recognition without demand. He whispered once more, barely audible, "Thank you for letting me be here." The glow of the lantern seemed to thrum in response, and the shadows of the void carried the soft warmth
of acknowledgement.
Morty closed his eyes, feeling a calm he had rarely known. The void cradled him gently, like a parent, a friend, a witness, and with that he let himself drift, fully, entirely, into the quiet, carrying the small lights of memory and connection within him as he surrendered to the soft, infinite hum of the void. Morty drifted slowly, carried by a quiet rhythm he had come to trust, a lantern floating beside him like a heartbeat made visible. The void stretched endlessly, yet he no longer felt its weight pressing upon him. Instead, It felt like a gentle sea, each movement soft, deliberate, and patient. He noticed, for the first time, the subtle textures of the darkness, a pattern of faint light, tiny sparks of memory scattered like dust across the infinite space. A faint scent of something familiar stirred in the air, though it could not have existed here. Vanilla and rain, the faint warmth of a kitchen on early mornings, the scent of freshly cut grass lingering after a summer shower. Morty inhaled deeply, letting it seep into him. He realized the void was teaching him to notice the small things, the unnoticed layers of life he had passed by for years. It was not the grand or the dramatic that held weight here, but the ordinary, the everyday, the subtle. He drifted toward a flicker in the distance, a soft pulse of light, as though the void itself had held a candle for him to follow. As he approached, the light revealed a small room suspended in the void, its walls transparent but tinted with warm amber. Inside, a table was set simply, a meal waiting without demand, an untouched cup of tea steaming faintly in the air. Morty recognized the shapes before even seeing the details. Forks, plates, a loaf of bread, sliced carefully, as if someone had thought about the comfort of another. He floated closer, lantern illuminating the edges of the space. The table seemed ordinary, yet in the void it felt sacred. Morty remembered the countless mornings at home when meals had been shared quietly, often without words, sometimes with arguments underneath, but always with a base layer of care that had gone unnoticed. He realized now that these small gestures had been anchors holding him steady through years of uncertainty and fear. A chair shifted slightly, though no one sat in it. Morty felt the subtle warmth of a presence, almost imperceptible, as if the memory of someone had been left behind to comfort him. He remembered Rick briefly, not with his usual sharpness or impatience, but softer, almost hesitant, a quiet acknowledgement. A plate had been set just for him, perhaps with a sandwich, perhaps with nothing at all, but it mattered nonetheless. Morty reached toward it with his hand, feeling nothing yet everything at once. The void had a way of making absence feel like presence, loss feel like sustenance. He lingered by the table, letting the lantern's glow wash over the surfaces, casting gentle shadows across the walls. The warmth of the scene seeped into him, and he understood the rhythm of care, the small, unnoticed acts that built a life from love rather than spectacle. Morty realized how often he had overlooked them, chasing larger goals, louder gestures, explosions of adventure. Here, in the quiet of the void, he could see the truth. Life's true weight was carried in these tiny moments, the gestures that never demanded recognition. A faint sound drifted in from somewhere he could not locate. Laughter, soft, almost shy, echoed across the void. It was not his own, nor anyone he could name, yet it felt deeply familiar. He remembered evenings with Summer, her voice teasing, insistent, carrying a mix of irritation and warmth. He remembered his mother's quiet hum as she moved through the house, the faint squeak of a floorboard under his father's steps. All these echoes coalesced into a gentle chorus of remembrance, carrying a weight he could not quantify, yet understood instinctively. The table shifted slightly, revealing more memories tucked beneath the surfaces. A small notebook lay open, pages marked with doodles, half-written thoughts, questions he had asked himself, and answers he had never shared. Morty reached toward it, lantern casting soft pools of light across the ink. He traced the words with his eyes, feeling the echo of the young person who had written them, uncertain and searching, yet persistent. The void allowed him to hold both the past and the present simultaneously, and for the first time he felt that it was enough to simply bear witness. He lingered longer, drifting through fragments of memory, each one gentle, luminous, weighted, with significance. A swing in the backyard appeared briefly, swinging in the windless night. A pair of sneakers lay abandoned at the edge of the porch, still holding the shape of a child's feet. A forgotten toy, a crumpled piece of paper, a cup of tea that had gone cold, each object a whisper of care, of life noticed and remembered. Morty's chest tightened, a soft ache that was neither sadness nor joy, but a mixture of both, tethering him to the invisible threads of living. The lantern beside him pulsed faintly, and Morty realized it had been waiting, holding space as he
wandered.
Its warmth reminded him of something profound he had learned in this endless silence. That presence, even without action, is a gift. Sometimes all a person needs is someone to be near, someone to watch, to acknowledge without expectation or judgment. The void had taught him that this kind of care was rare, precious, and transformative. A shadow shifted at the edge of the room, delicate, fleeting, yet unmistakable. Morty recognized it immediately. Himself, younger, small, hesitant,
uncertain. The boy looked up at him, wide-eyed, searching. Morty did not speak. He did not try to explain, to guide, to instruct.
He simply let the lantern's glow wash over them both, holding the boy in a quiet circle of light. The younger Morty exhaled softly, and Morty felt the subtle release of tension ripple through him as well. It was not about fixing, not about correcting, not about changing the past. It was about acknowledgement. "I see you," he whispered. "You're not alone. You've never been alone." The words were small, almost fragile, but they carried the full weight of understanding. The shadows of memory swirled around him, rising and falling like gentle tides. The void itself seemed to pulse with the rhythm of all that he had seen, all that he had remembered, all that he had acknowledged. Morty drifted through it, lantern glowing, heart open, letting each fragment of life, each quiet gesture, imprint itself upon him. Finally, he curled into himself beside the table, letting the warmth of memory and the steady glow of the lantern
lull him. The void hummed softly, a cradle of light, presence, and quiet understanding. Morty exhaled, releasing a slow, peaceful sigh. He understood now that the journey through the void was not about arrival or discovery in the conventional sense.
It was about learning to witness, to hold, to care without demand, and that, he realized, was the most profound lesson of all. He whispered softly, barely audible, "Thank you for letting me be here." The lantern pulsed in answer, and the void seemed to hum with quiet approval. Morty closed his eyes, surrendering fully to the calm, to the gentle embrace of presence and memory. He let himself drift, carrying the warmth of ordinary miracles, the small lights of care, and the quiet constellations of acknowledgement within him as he floated deeper into peace. Morty drifted through the void, the lantern beside him casting a steady, warm glow. The darkness stretched endlessly, but he no longer felt lost. He had learned to move slowly, to let each step, each breath, be deliberate, carrying the weight of memory and the light of quiet understanding. The void had shifted from something vast and empty to something intimate, a space where each thought, each feeling, was given room to breathe. Ahead, a soft shimmer caught his eye. It was faint at first, a glimmer along the edges of perception, but it grew steadily as he drew closer. Morty realized it was a city, not quite like any he had ever seen, suspended in the void. Buildings rose in soft curves, their surfaces glowing, with a gentle internal light. Streets wound lazily through the city, curving in ways that seemed impossible in any physical world, but natural here. The city exuded a calm, unhurried rhythm, as though time itself had softened, allowing life to
unfold at its own pace.
Morty floated along one of the streets, lantern in hand, noticing the details around him. Small gardens bloomed in impossible ways, flowers glowing faintly, their petals swaying without wind. Fountains trickled in slow arcs, water suspended mid-air, before falling gently into unseen basins. The city felt alive, not with noise or urgency, but with quiet presence, as if every corner, every shadow had been placed with intention to foster calm. He passed a shop, its windows aglow, displaying objects that seemed ordinary yet filled with meaning. A cup carved simply but imbued with the warmth of countless hands. A book, pages worn, filled with half-formed ideas and sketches, each one carrying the pulse of its creator. Morty paused, letting the lantern's light touch the glass. He remembered similar objects from his own life, the cup he had clutched, on cold mornings, the notebooks he had scribbled in when no one was watching. Here, in the void, ordinary things became extraordinary through attention, through acknowledgement. As he moved through the city, he noticed figures wandering along the streets, their forms soft and indistinct, yet unmistakably alive. They carried themselves with quiet purpose, moving slowly, not in haste, their presence resonating like a gentle chord in the air. Morty did not feel the need to interact. Simply observing, simply being present was enough. He realized that the city was a reflection of the care he had begun to carry within himself, a manifestation of attention, patience, and the acknowledgement of life's quiet wonders. He paused near a fountain, watching the suspended water droplets glimmer in the
soft light.
Morty remembered the nights he had spent staring at stars, feeling small and insignificant, wishing for understanding, for connection. The city felt like a mirror of that longing, but transformed. Here, small acts of attention, simple moments of presence, had weight and meaning. Morty realized that he had been seeking this for a long time, not adventure, not excitement, not recognition, but the quiet knowledge that life, even in its ordinary rhythms, mattered. A figure appeared near the fountain, faintly illuminated, familiar, yet softened by the dreamlike quality of the city. It was Rick, but not the loud, impatient version Morty had known. This Rick was quieter, more reflective, his movements deliberate, his gaze steady. Morty approached slowly, lantern
held high.
He felt no fear, no need to explain, only a soft curiosity, a desire to witness. Rick's eyes met his, and for the first time, Morty felt a deep, unspoken understanding. The figure nodded faintly, acknowledging presence without words. Morty's chest warmed. He realized that the essence of their relationship had always been present, even beneath noise, conflict, and frustration. Sometimes care was quiet, subtle, manifesting in moments that could easily be overlooked. But here, in the void, it became visible, tangible, radiant. Morty wandered further, following winding streets and softly glowing lights. The city shifted gently, responding to his presence, as if aware of him, molding itself to the contours of his mind. He passed a small square, where benches glowed faintly. Figures sat silently, some alone, some in pairs, all exuding calm. Morty noticed a child laughing softly, tossing a paper airplane that drifted lazily before landing on a glowing street lamp. The simplicity of the scene, the unhurried joy, struck him profoundly. He remembered moments from his own childhood, simple pleasures, unnoticed gestures, the warmth of laughter shared without demand. He moved toward a bridge spanning a softly flowing river, the water glimmering as though filled with stars. Morty stepped onto the bridge and paused, letting the lantern's glow reflect on the water. Beneath him, the river flowed gently, carrying memories of home, of small victories, of moments of connection and care. He realized that the void had become not a place of emptiness, but a repository of the life he had lived, a space where attention and presence magnified significance. A soft wind brushed past him, though he could feel no air. It carried a faint melody, a lullaby half-remembered, perhaps sung by his mother or by Rick in rare moments of patience. The sound swirled around him, harmonizing with the glow of the city, the shimmer of the fountain, the pulse of the lantern. Morty felt a warmth settle in his chest, a soft reassurance that he was seen, acknowledged, and understood. He drifted along the bridge, noticing reflections of his younger self in the water. The child he had been stared back at him, hesitant,
uncertain, yet alive and curious. Morty did not speak, did not reach, but let the child exist in the reflection, allowing acknowledgement without interference.
The lantern's glow softened, and he felt a gentle pulse of connection pass through him. He understood now that presence alone could be transformative, that acknowledgement, even without explanation, carried immense power. As the bridge dissolved, behind him the city stretched into the distance, softly glowing streets weaving through a luminous haze. Morty felt a profound peace settle within him. The void was no longer merely a place of wandering, it had become a space of understanding, a quiet sanctuary where he could observe, remember, and hold space for life's small wonders. He realized that this journey was not about arriving, not about conquering or achieving, but about learning to notice, to care, and to witness. Morty exhaled, a long, slow release that carried the weight of understanding and the warmth of acknowledgement. The lantern pulsed beside him, steady and sure, reflecting the rhythm of his heartbeat. He whispered softly, "Thank you for letting me be here." The city seemed to hum in response, a chorus of soft lights, gentle sounds, and subtle movements, affirming his presence. He let himself drift, carried by the gentle flow of the void, the lantern illuminating the path ahead. Memories of home, of Rick, of his family, of childhood joys and quiet fears, coalesced into a tapestry of light and
understanding.
Morty felt connected to the infinite, not through grandeur or spectacle, but through the quiet acknowledgement of life's small, meaningful moments. Finally, he curled gently into himself, letting the lantern float nearby, a pulse of warmth and light. The void hummed softly, holding him, embracing him, and he surrendered fully to the gentle rhythm. Morty's heart, once heavy with uncertainty, now carried a calm, steady pulse, a reminder that presence and care, even in their simplest forms, were enough. And somewhere, deep in the quiet glow of the void, Morty understood that he was not merely drifting. He was home, in the sense that mattered most, present, acknowledged, and at peace. Morty drifted slowly through the void, the lantern, floating at his side like a quiet heartbeat. Time here had no sharp edges, no urgency. Every step he took, every inhalation, seemed to ripple softly through the endless darkness, carrying with it echoes of memory, fragments of light, and whispers of things left unspoken. The void had ceased to feel like emptiness. It was now a companion, patient, attentive, listening without expectation. Ahead, a faint shimmer caught his eye, diffused and soft like moonlight through mist. He moved toward it, careful not to disturb the subtle rhythm of the space around him. As he drew closer, the shimmer resolved into a room, suspended mid-air, walls translucent and glowing with a warm amber hue. The interior was simple, a space that could have existed anywhere, yet here it felt sacred. A table lay in the center, unadorned but perfectly set, a teacup, a small plate of bread, a folded napkin. Each object seemed alive, humming faintly with the care of whoever had placed it there. Morty hovered for a moment, lantern casting gentle light across the surfaces. The scene reminded him of countless evenings at home, quiet dinners where words had often been secondary to the act of presence itself. He remembered his sister chattering about school, Rick muttering absent-minded explanations of science, and his parents' soft movements in the background, unnoticed yet grounding. In the void, all these gestures were magnified, revealing their true significance. They were not mundane, they were profound. A chair shifted slightly, though no one sat in it. Morty felt a subtle warmth emanate from it, almost as though it remembered those who had occupied it. He thought of Rick, not in his usual chaotic, impatient form, but softened, quieter, deliberate in his small acts of care. Morty realized how
often he had overlooked the gestures that mattered most, the ones that didn't scream for attention, yet anchored him in ways he had never appreciated. He moved along the edge of the room, watching as the void shimmered around him.
Faint echoes of sound emerged, soft and delicate, like wind brushing against leaves or distant waves lapping a quiet shore. Morty recognized fragments, a lullaby hummed by his mother, the scrape of his sneakers against the kitchen floor, the soft, impatient sigh of Rick as he passed by. Each sound, each memory felt alive here, suspended in space like threads connecting past and present. A new shape emerged from the glow, a tree, delicate, almost ethereal. Its branches arched gracefully, tipped with faint lights that pulsed like tiny stars. Morty approached it carefully, sensing that it was more than a tree. Each light on its branches carried a memory, a fragment of life, small moments of care, joy, or recognition that he had barely noticed before. One light revealed a swing in his backyard, swaying gently as though an invisible child had left it in motion. Another glowed with the image of a book he had cherished, pages dog-eared, a testament to curiosity and quiet attention. Morty reached toward one of the lights, fingers brushing the faint warmth of memory. The void responded subtly, a pulse of soft energy that resonated with his heartbeat. He understood slowly that the space around him was alive, not in the sense of danger or spectacle, but in the sense of care. Every detail, every light was acknowledgement. The void itself seemed to recognize him, honoring his presence as he honored the memories it held. He lingered near the tree, letting the lantern's glow mingle with the pulses of memory. He thought of the countless times he had longed to be, noticed, to have a presence acknowledged, whether by Rick, by family, or by friends who had drifted away. And here, in the silence of the void, every small longing was answered, not in grand gestures, but in quiet affirmation. He felt a subtle swelling of gratitude, almost painful in its gentleness. A shadow moved across the edge of the glow, faint, but unmistakable. Morty turned and recognized the figure immediately, a younger version of himself, small, tentative, uncertain, yet alive. The boy glanced at him, eyes wide, hesitant, searching for reassurance. Morty's chest tightened. He wanted to speak, to comfort, yet he realized that words were not required. Simply being present, letting the boy exist in the glow of acknowledgement, was enough. Morty whispered softly, "I see you. You're not alone." The words were small, almost fragile, but they carried the weight of recognition. The boy's shoulders relaxed slightly, the tension of years melting, if only for a moment. The void seemed to hum around them, a gentle resonance that acknowledged both past and present. Morty understood that sometimes the simplest gestures, presence, attention, acknowledgement, were the most profound acts of care. He drifted slowly along the branches of the tree, touching lights that pulsed gently in response. He saw, fleeting, images of Rick in different forms, teaching, arguing, laughing, sighing. Each moment carried nuance, a quiet depth he had overlooked before. Morty realized that Rick's care, subtle as it was, had shaped him more than he had ever allowed himself to admit. The void, with its patient attentiveness, magnified this truth, showing him the interconnectedness of life's smallest acts. Further along, a faint melody arose, drifting from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was a lullaby, soft, almost forgotten, yet familiar. Morty closed his eyes and let it fill him, feeling warmth radiate from the lantern and the tree, from every pulse of light in the void. Memories of home, of quiet afternoons, of moments when someone had simply noticed him, swirled gently through him. Each one was a soft exhale of care, a reminder that he had been seen even when he thought he had not. Morty continued his slow journey, moving through the city of soft lights and glowing streets that now seemed to pulse in response to him. He passed figures wandering quietly, their forms indistinct but radiating calm. He did not speak or act, only allowed himself to notice them, to be present. The void had shown him that witnessing another's presence, fully and without judgment, could be a gift as profound as any heroic deed. Finally, he came to a small bridge arching over a softly flowing river. The water glimmered with the light of stars, suspended mid-flow, reflecting memories of home, of small joys, of moments that mattered far more than he had realized. Morty stepped onto the bridge, lantern casting gentle light over the rippling surface. He exhaled slowly, a long, soft sigh, feeling the full weight of everything he had witnessed, remembered, and acknowledged. He curled gently into himself, letting the lantern float beside him, its pulse steady, rhythmic, reassuring. The void hummed softly around him, a cradle of memory, presence, and quiet care. Morty whispered once more, barely audible, "Thank you for letting me be here." The city, the tree, the river, the glowing lights all seemed to pulse in acknowledgement. He felt at peace, grounded in the quiet, carrying with him the weightless warmth of recognition and understanding. And somewhere, deep in the calm, infinite glow of the void, Morty realized he was not merely drifting. He was learning, slowly, to be present, to care, to witness life's small wonders, and to hold space for others and himself. Morty moved through the void with a rhythm that had become familiar, each step deliberate, each breath carrying the quiet weight of memory. The lantern beside him pulsed gently, its warm glow steady, as if marking the cadence of his heartbeat. The void stretched endlessly, yet it no longer felt daunting. It had grown into a space of subtle revelations, a quiet sanctuary where every light, every shadow, every flicker of color carried meaning. Ahead, a soft shimmer caught his attention. He drifted toward it, lantern floating like a heartbeat in the darkness. The shimmer resolved into a garden, suspended mid-air, its edges glowing faintly. The flowers here were unlike any he had seen before, petals shifting between colors, leaves curling gently as though breathing. Small streams of light ran like water between the plants, carrying a soft hum that resonated with the pulse of the lantern and the rhythm of his own chest. Morty recognized instinctively that this garden was a repository of memory, care, and presence, a living reflection of attention given and received. He moved closer, noticing that each plant held a small fragment of life, a memory, a gesture, a moment of quiet significance. A delicate rose shimmered with the image of a sandwich, packed carefully by his mother, left on the counter for him when he was too young to remember asking. A small lily glowed with the memory of a paper airplane launched on a summer afternoon, carried lazily by the wind. Morty's chest tightened with a subtle ache. These were ordinary moments, but in the void, their significance was magnified. They were acts of love, small yet profound, that had shaped him quietly over time. A faint path wound through the garden, lined with lanterns that pulsed softly in response to his presence. Morty drifted along it, his eyes tracing the gentle sway of petals and the glimmer of light. He remembered similar paths in his own life, the hallways of home at night, quiet corridors in school, streets in his neighborhood that had seemed insignificant but were filled with fleeting moments of joy or comfort. Each memory seemed to bloom here, radiant and alive, carrying the warmth of acknowledgement he had never fully appreciated before. Near the center of the garden, a small pond shimmered, its surface reflecting the glow of the lantern and the shifting colors of the flowers. Morty leaned closer, noticing faint ripples in the water. Each ripple carried the image of someone he had known. Rick, Summer, his parents, friends long forgotten. They were not perfect, nor entirely complete, yet their presence in the pond made him feel a quiet connection. He realized that these echoes of others, carefully preserved in this suspended space, were proof of care. To notice someone, even briefly to acknowledge them, was enough to leave an imprint that outlived spoken words. A shadow moved at the edge of the pond. Morty turned and saw a figure emerge from the glow, a younger version of himself crouched, low, hesitant, unsure. The boy's eyes were wide, filled with curiosity and fear, and yet there was a faint glimmer of hope there as well. Morty did not approach immediately. He hovered nearby, letting the lantern's glow fall between them. The void had taught him patience, the kind that allowed presence without demand, acknowledgement without expectation. He whispered softly, "I see you. You're not alone." The younger Morty blinked slowly, shoulders relaxing just slightly. The void seemed to hum around them, a gentle resonance affirming the quiet exchange. Morty realized that he had spent so many years trying to rush through life, to understand, to fix, to achieve. Here he learned that sometimes the most profound impact came from simply being present, holding space, noticing another's existence. The acknowledgement itself was enough, and sometimes more than enough. He drifted further along the path, the garden expanding endlessly in all directions. Flowers shifted and swayed as he passed, their glow brightening subtly. Morty reached toward a patch of daisies, each bloom carrying fragments of laughter, summer afternoons, playful teasing inside, jokes with friends. He could not touch them. Not really. Yet their warmth seeped into him, filling him with a quiet satisfaction. The void had a way of allowing presence to be felt without physical contact, making each moment intimate in a way words could not capture. Soft breeze moved through the garden, though Morty felt no wind. It carried with it faint melodies, fragments of songs he had once heard or hummed himself. They were familiar, yet elusive, floating around him in patterns that made him feel deeply rooted and simultaneously weightless. He realized that the garden was a reflection of the self, not as he had been or as he might become, but as he truly was, a being capable of care, reflection, and connection even in the quietest, most unnoticed moments. Further along, he noticed a small bridge spanning a gentle stream of light that wound through the garden. The water shimmered with faint memories, each ripple reflecting moments he had once overlooked. The quiet sigh of Rick after a long explanation, the faint smile of summer when no one was watching, the soft hum of his mother cleaning late at night. Morty stepped onto the bridge, letting the lantern's glow illuminate the delicate surface. He paused, exhaling slowly, letting the weight of recognition and gratitude settle in his chest. The void around him seemed to respond, pulsing gently with the rhythm of his heartbeat. Morty felt a warmth rise within him, a sense of calm he had rarely known. He understood that the garden, the pond, the path, and the bridge were not just spaces within the void. They were manifestations of attention, acknowledgement, and presence. Each act of noticing, each moment of care created a ripple that extended far beyond what could be measured or seen. Morty continued to drift, the lantern pulsing gently beside him. He passed clusters of flowers, patches of soft moss, and glowing streams, absorbing the quiet significance of every fragment. He realized that life's most profound lessons were often subtle, embedded in ordinary gestures, overlooked for their simplicity, but monumental in effect. To notice, to acknowledge, to be present, these were the threads that wove connection and meaning into existence. Finally, he settled at the edge of the pond, curling into himself. The lantern floated beside him, steady and warm, casting gentle reflections across the water and the shimmering flowers. Morty exhaled slowly, allowing himself to sink into the calm, carrying with him the quiet warmth of acknowledgement, the subtle power of presence, and the soft assurance that he was seen and remembered. He whispered softly, "Thank you for letting me be here." The void pulsed gently in response, a subtle chorus of light, warmth, and resonance. And somewhere, within the gentle glow of the infinite garden, Morty realized he was learning the truest form of care, to witness, to acknowledge, and to exist fully in quiet harmony with life, memory, and presence. Morty drifted further into the void, the soft glow of his lantern stretching around him like a circle of warmth in the vast darkness. Time had taken on a gentle, fluid quality here, each moment expanding without hurry. He moved with care, letting the rhythm of his own breathing guide him, the soft pulse of the lantern keeping pace like a quiet heartbeat in the endless quiet. The void had become a companion, patient and attentive, reflecting the gentle presence he carried within himself. Ahead, he noticed a faint shimmer, delicate and irregular, like sunlight breaking through a thin layer of mist. As he approached, the shimmer resolved into a bridge of light suspended between two unseen banks, hovering gently over a slow-flowing stream of silver-colored mist. The bridge itself was subtle, composed of fine lines of illumination that curved and spiraled gracefully. Morty felt an instinctive pull toward it, a quiet curiosity that was tempered with the calm he had learned to hold in this place. The air, or something like air, was alive here, carrying faint echoes of laughter, the hush of distant voices, and the faint fragrance of rain-soaked earth. Morty inhaled deeply, letting the sensation wash through him. It reminded him of the early mornings at home before the noise of the day began, when he could lie quietly and listen to the small rhythms
of life around him.
The void, in its infinite patience, seemed intent on teaching him to notice the soft and subtle, to honor the quiet patterns of living. As he stepped onto the bridge, the lantern's glow spread across the delicate structure, illuminating its curves and spirals. He felt the faint pulse of energy beneath his feet, as if the bridge itself was aware of his presence, adjusting and flowing in harmony with him. Morty paused, letting the gentle movement sink in. He realized that the void was less a place to traverse and more a space to experience, to witness, to become attuned to the interplay of light, memory, and presence. Beneath the bridge, the stream shimmered softly, reflecting fragments of his own memories. He saw flashes of his childhood, mornings spent with his sister, the quiet hum of his mother's work in the kitchen, afternoons reading comics and half-forgotten sketches strewn across his desk. The images were delicate, sometimes fleeting, yet they pulsed with significance, reminding him of the quiet acts of care and attention that had shaped him in ways he had never fully acknowledged. A soft ripple moved across the stream, carrying the faint reflection of Rick. Not the chaotic, impatient Rick he had known, but a gentler, softer version, one that existed in moments of quiet care, brief instruction, and unexpected kindness. Morty felt a warmth rise in his chest. He realized that the void allowed him to observe these things without judgment, without the need to act or respond. The presence alone, the acknowledgement of what had been, was transformative. He continued along the bridge, noticing small points of light dancing at its edges. They shimmered faintly, responding to his proximity. Each point of light was a memory, a gesture, a fragment of care that had existed quietly in his life, a sandwich packed with thought, a hand offered without comment, a whispered lullaby, a glance of understanding. Morty traced the points with his gaze, feeling the resonance of recognition settle into his chest. He understood that these small, seemingly insignificant acts had accumulated into a form of quiet power, a lattice of care and presence that had held him steady across years of uncertainty. At the midpoint of the bridge, a figure emerged. It was a younger version of himself, crouched low, hesitant, eyes wide with both curiosity and fear. The boy looked at him without speaking, unsure whether to trust or retreat. Morty felt a soft ache in his chest, a mixture of tenderness and
understanding. He did not step forward, he did not reach for the boy.
He simply allowed himself to exist in the same space, letting the lantern's glow fall between them like a circle of gentle reassurance. "I see you," Morty whispered softly. "You're not alone." The boy blinked slowly, shoulders relaxing, just a fraction. The void seemed to hum around them, carrying the subtle acknowledgement of presence, the quiet affirmation that even in moments of fear and uncertainty, connection was possible. Morty realized again that care did not always require action or explanation. Sometimes the simple act of being present was enough. The bridge shifted subtly beneath his feet, responding to his focus, curving gently, as if encouraging him forward. Morty continued, letting the lantern illuminate each step, noticing the delicate interplay of light and shadow. He passed fragments of other lives, glowing orbs containing laughter, hands held in silent support, fleeting gestures of kindness, repeated endlessly. Each fragment pulsed with resonance, as though the void itself was teaching him the profound weight of small, unnoticed acts. A soft wind, though there was no air, brushed past him, carrying faint melodies from moments long past. He heard a
lullaby his mother hummed on rainy mornings, the quiet hum of Rick at work on some half-finished project, the laughter of his sister trailing through hallways.
Morty let the sounds fill him, aware that they were more than memory. They were affirmations of existence, whispers that his life, though ordinary in some ways, had been meaningful and witnessed. Toward the end of the bridge, the mist beneath him glowed faintly, forming gentle arcs and ripples. Morty paused and let himself drift, letting the lantern's glow mingle with the faint light below. He noticed subtle reflections of himself at different ages, each version existing in quiet harmony, none better or worse than the others. The void allowed him to see them all simultaneously, to acknowledge their fears, their curiosities, their small triumphs and failures, and to feel connection rather than judgment. He exhaled slowly, a long, soft sigh that carried the warmth of understanding. The bridge, the stream, the distant shimmer of memories all seemed to respond, pulsing gently in rhythm with his heartbeat. Morty realized that the journey through the void was less about movement or discovery, and more about acknowledgement, presence, and the quiet cultivation of awareness. Every light, every memory, every fragment of care was a part of the same thread, connecting past, present, and self. Finally, he curled into himself at the edge of the bridge, letting the lantern float beside
him like a quiet heartbeat in the darkness.
The void hummed softly around him, carrying the warmth of memories, of acknowledgement, and of presence. Morty whispered once more, barely audible, "Thank you for letting me be here." The faint glow of lights, the pulse of the lantern, and the hum of the void formed a gentle chorus, affirming his place, his existence, and the quiet significance of being present. Somewhere deep in the endless shimmer of the void, Morty realized he was learning the truest form of care. Witnessing, acknowledging and holding space without expectation. And in that realization he felt a profound peace, a calm that carried him forward, floating gently into the infinite embrace of quiet understanding. Morty moved through the void as though he were walking through a dream shaped entirely by quiet gestures and soft memories. Each step, each drift of the lantern carried the weight of attention and care. The darkness stretched endlessly around him, yet he no longer felt lost or uncertain. Here, in this vast, suspended space, he could notice the subtlest of things, the faint pulse of light behind shadows, the gentle hum that seemed to emanate from nowhere and everywhere, the scent of rain on forgotten streets of his childhood. Ahead, a faint glimmer shimmered like moonlight filtered through mist. Morty approached slowly, lantern floating beside him like a patient companion. As he drew near, he realized it was a staircase suspended mid-air, spiraling gently upward and downward
simultaneously.
Each step radiated a soft glow, warm and steady, as though inviting him to move not hurriedly, but with deliberate attention. Morty felt no fear. There was a calm assurance in the design of the staircase, a sense that it existed not to transport him somewhere, but to teach him how to move. He stepped lightly, lantern illuminating each spiral, each faint reflection of memory etched along the edges of the steps. Some steps carried echoes of his younger self, hesitant and uncertain, his eyes wide with questions he could not yet articulate. Others carried glimpses of Rick, softer than he remembered, moments where care and attention had been present beneath impatience and chaos. Morty realized that each step was not a path to a destination, but a gentle unfolding of understanding, a chance to witness the layers of his own life and the lives intertwined with his. The air, or something like air, around him hummed softly, carrying fragments of sound he recognized, a spoon scraping against a plate on a quiet morning, the faint echo of summer's laughter in a hallway, the soft murmur of Rick's voice explaining something incomprehensible, yet strangely comforting. Morty inhaled slowly, letting the rhythm of these small moments settle into him. He felt a subtle warmth spread through his chest, a sense of anchoring that was both profound and almost imperceptible. Midway up the staircase he paused, allowing the lantern to float slightly ahead of him, illuminating a small alcove. Inside, he saw delicate threads of light forming tiny constellations, each one containing a memory he had once overlooked. A folded note left on his desk, a hand offered in quiet support, the faint glimmer of approval in someone's eyes when he had
acted without expectation.
Morty reached toward one of the threads, though he could not touch it in the conventional sense. Still, he felt the warmth of its presence, a gentle pulse that echoed through him. He realized slowly that the void was showing him a kind of geometry, of care, an invisible architecture built from acts of attention, acknowledgement, and presence. These threads, lights and pulses were not grand or loud. They did not demand recognition. Yet they carried immense weight, forming a lattice that had held him, guided him, and sustained him even when he had not known it. Morty's chest ached. Softly, a mixture of gratitude and wonder as he traced the patterns in his mind. A faint shadow emerged from the alcove, delicate and hesitant. Morty recognized the figure immediately, a younger version of himself, small and uncertain, eyes wide with both curiosity and fear. The boy glanced at him, searching for reassurance, for acknowledgement. Morty did not move closer. He let the lantern's glow fall between them, creating a circle of gentle light. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You're not alone." The boy blinked slowly, shoulders relaxing just a fraction, the tension of years melting for a brief moment. The staircase seemed to shift subtly in response, curving gently upward and downward in patterns that felt both endless and intimate. Morty continued, letting the lantern illuminate each step, noticing faint pulses of light along the edges. They carried echoes of small acts of care. Rick teaching something patiently, Summer offering a soft smile, his mother's hands moving carefully across the kitchen counter. Each pulse, each thread, reinforced the understanding that presence mattered more than action, attention more than achievement. As he ascended further, faint melodies drifted through the void, though there was no wind.
A lullaby his mother had sung, fragments of Rick's muttered instructions, the quiet hum of a summer evening. These melodies interwove, forming a soft, imperceptible chorus. Morty let them fill him, feeling a warmth radiate from the lantern.
From the staircase, from the threads of light surrounding him, he realized that these were not mere echoes of the past, but affirmations, gentle reminders that life, in all its small gestures, had been seen, had been witnessed, had mattered. The upper steps led him to a platform bathed in soft amber glow. Here, the staircase seemed to pause, giving him space to rest, to reflect. Morty floated to the center, letting the lantern hover beside him. Around him, the threads of light shimmered and shifted, faint constellations of memory that connected.
moments, people, and gestures.
He traced the lines gently in his mind, feeling the resonance of gratitude, of acknowledgement, of care that had been present even when unspoken or unnoticed. He thought of Rick, not as a figure of chaos and impatience, but as a source of subtle influence, a teacher in moments unrecognized, a presence that had shaped him quietly. He thought of Summer, whose laughter and insistence on being seen had grounded him. He thought of his parents, whose small, unnoticed acts of care had held him steady through years of uncertainty. Morty realized that all these threads, these constellations, were part of the same network, forming the architecture of his own quiet, strength, and resilience. A gentle exhale left him, long and slow, carrying with it the weight of understanding and the soft ache of gratitude. Morty whispered into the void, "Thank you for letting me be here." The staircase pulsed gently. In response, threads of light shimmering in harmony, the lantern glowing steadily beside him. The void hummed softly, as if affirming his presence, his acknowledgement, and the quiet significance of witnessing life in all its subtle forms. He curled gently into himself at the center of the platform, letting the lantern float nearby. The Dushuk staircase spiraled gently around him, a lattice of light, memory, and presence. Morty exhaled again, a slow, peaceful release, feeling the profound calm that comes from understanding the weight of small, unnoticed acts of care. The void, once vast and uncertain, had become a sanctuary of recognition, acknowledgement, and quiet warmth. And somewhere within this gentle architecture of light, threads, and memory, Morty understood the truest lesson of the void, that the smallest gestures, the quietest acts of attention, could carry the most profound meaning, leaving a legacy not in loud declarations, but in presence, acknowledgement, and care. Morty drifted onward through the quiet void, the lantern floating beside him like a heartbeat made visible. The darkness stretched endlessly, yet it no longer felt like emptiness. It was a canvas upon which moments of care, memory, and subtle understanding were etched in soft, glowing threads. Each step he took, each gentle sway, seemed to resonate with the faint pulse of the void itself, a rhythm that mirrored his own thoughts and feelings. Ahead, he noticed a faint shimmer that seemed to twist and fold in upon itself, like light bending around invisible edges. Morty moved toward it carefully, lantern illuminating the subtle contours. As he approached, he realized the shimmer was a room suspended in the void, circular and open, walls made of faintly glowing threads. Inside, a table was set simply, a teacup resting atop it, faint steam curling in slow, deliberate arcs that seemed to dance without wind. The room exuded a quiet warmth, the kind that made one feel noticed without explanation. Morty stepped closer, letting the lantern's glow mingle with the gentle pulse of the space. He noticed that the teacup radiated a faint warmth, not from heat, but from memory. He thought of mornings at home, the quiet ritual of drinking something warm, the unspoken care in simple gestures. Each object here carried significance, magnified by the void's patient attention. Morty realized that even the smallest acts unnoticed in the flow of daily life held a power far greater than he had allowed himself to acknowledge. He wandered through the room slowly, observing the details. A stack of folded napkins glowed softly, each one imbued with echoes of hands that had touched them, moments of preparation, care, and attention. A chair, its form simple, hummed faintly with the memory of someone resting there, breathing, existing, being seen. Morty felt a warmth rise within him. He understood now that presence itself, whether given or received, carried weight, a resonance that extended far beyond immediate perception. A soft figure emerged from the edge of the room, delicate and indistinct at first. Morty recognized the form immediately. A younger version of himself, small, uncertain, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. The boy hesitated, unsure whether to approach or retreat, and Morty felt a familiar ache in his chest. He did not move toward the boy, did not try to speak in the usual sense. Instead, he let the lantern hover between them, casting a circle of warm light. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You're not alone." The boy's shoulders relaxed subtly, the tension of years dissipating in a gentle exhale. The void itself seemed to respond, pulsing in quiet acknowledgement. Morty realized that often the most profound form of care was not in words or deeds, but in presence. Just being there, holding space, witnessing without judgment, that was enough. Sometimes it was everything. It was everything. He turned his attention to the edges of the room where threads of light extended outward like delicate vines. Each thread contained a memory, moments of joy, gestures of kindness, tiny acts of care that had gone unnoticed in daily life. Morty traced the threads with his gaze, feeling a resonance ripple through him. He saw Rick in softened fragments, moments when the older man had taught without impatience, explained without ridicule, or offered a hand without fanfare. He saw Summer, whose laughter and insistence on being acknowledged had grounded him more than he had realized. The room shifted subtly as he moved, expanding slightly, then contracting, responding to his attention. Morty noticed that the threads of light pulsed gently, in rhythm with his own heartbeat. Each pulse carried warmth, the quiet reminder that life's smallest gestures had significance. Even the most fleeting moment of acknowledgement could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that words alone could never capture. He felt a profound gratitude, a soft ache of understanding for the subtle architecture of care that had shaped him. A faint melody drifted through the room, though there was no wind. It was a collage of sounds, fragments from his life. His mother, humming softly in the kitchen, Rick muttering an explanation about something he barely understood, Summer's laughter echoing down the hall. Morty let the sounds fill him, feeling them resonate in the quiet chambers of memory. The melody was not a song to follow, nor a message to decipher. It was a gentle affirmation that he had been seen, that his life had mattered, even in the smallest gestures. He drifted toward a small window in the circular room, a pane of light suspended mid-air. Beyond it, the void stretched endlessly, dotted with faint glimmers, each one a distant memory or fragment of care. Morty leaned close, feeling a soft pulse emanate from the light. He realized that these distant points were connected, forming a lattice of presence and attention, a network of quiet understanding that extended beyond time and space. Each point, each memory, was a reminder that even unseen acts of care left lasting impressions. Morty exhaled slowly, a long, deliberate breath that carried the weight of recognition and gratitude. He whispered softly, "Thank you for letting me be here." The lantern pulsed gently, threads of light responded, and the void seemed to hum in acknowledgement. He felt a profound calm settle within him, a quiet assurance that presence, attention, and care were more powerful than any dramatic
action or grand gesture.
In this space, everything mattered precisely because it was small, deliberate, and witnessed. He drifted to the center of the room and curled into himself, letting the lantern float beside him like a heartbeat made visible. The threads of light shimmered softly, moving gently with the pulse of his breath. Morty thought of all the ways he had been seen and not seen, acknowledged and overlooked, loved and sometimes ignored. Here, in the void, he understood that all of it mattered. The sum of small gestures, quiet presence, and subtle attention formed the foundation of life itself, a quiet architecture of care that could sustain and nurture. Somewhere in the soft glow of the room, Morty felt a profound sense of continuity. He understood that every act of acknowledgement he had received, every gesture of care, had built a lattice that held him steady, and the same was true for every act he offered, even in passing. Life, he realized, was composed not of grand battles or sweeping adventures, but of small, deliberate threads, each one contributing to the quiet stability and beauty of the world. Morty exhaled again, longer and softer this time, feeling the warmth of understanding fill him completely. The lantern pulsed gently beside him, threads of light shimmered in subtle harmony, and the void hummed softly. He whispered once more, "Thank you for letting me be here." And somewhere, deep in the quiet shimmer of the void, he felt that everything he had witnessed, remembered, and acknowledged had been enough. That presence itself, gentle and deliberate, carried meaning. And in that moment, Morty understood that he was not merely drifting. He was learning the truest form of care, to witness, to acknowledge, and to hold space even when no one was watching. And in the quiet embrace of the void, he felt a deep, steady peace, the kind that comes from knowing that life, memory, and attention are all inseparably intertwined. Morty moved through the void with a calm, deliberate pace, the lantern beside him floating like a heartbeat made visible. Each drift carried with it the quiet resonance of memory, of moments observed and acknowledged. The darkness around him was no longer a void of absence, but a space brimming with subtle life, faint pulses of care, and whispers of presence that he could almost hear if he listened closely enough. Ahead, a faint glow shimmered, gentle and wavering, as though breathing. Morty approached slowly, lantern illuminating the edges of the space. The shimmer resolved into a small room suspended in the void, its walls translucent and warm. Inside, a table was set simply, a cup, a small plate of bread, and a folded cloth. The objects seemed ordinary, yet they radiated a soft significance, as though each had been touched by care, intention, or quiet thoughtfulness. Morty paused, sensing that even in their stillness, they were alive with meaning. He drifted closer, letting the lantern's glow mingle with the soft warmth emanating from the room. Each detail carried memory. The curve of the cup, faintly chipped. At the rim, the cloth folded carefully, edges aligned. The bread, a reminder of simple nourishment and care. Morty thought of countless small moments he had overlooked, sandwiches packed without question, hands brushing against his own in reassurance, quiet acknowledgements that had gone unnoticed. Each act, though unremarkable in the flow of life, had formed a lattice of care that sustained him in ways he had never fully realized. As he moved through the room, a faint figure emerged. Morty recognized it instantly, a younger version of himself, small and hesitant, eyes wide with uncertainty. The boy's posture was cautious, unsure whether to approach or retreat. Morty allowed the lantern to hover between them, casting a circle of gentle light. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You're not alone." The boy blinked slowly, shoulders relaxing just slightly. The void seemed to hum around them, carrying the quiet resonance of acknowledgement, of being seen without question. Morty noticed threads of light stretching across the room, delicate lines that pulsed softly with life. Each thread contained a memory, a gesture, a fragment of attention or care. Rick explaining something with patience, Summer's laughter filling an empty space, his mother humming quietly while working. Morty traced the threads in his mind, feeling the warmth of recognition ripple through him. He realized slowly that the void allowed him to witness the architecture of life in its purest form, not action or drama, but subtle gestures, presence, and attention that carried profound meaning. The room shifted subtly as he moved, expanding slightly and then contracting, like it was breathing. Morty allowed himself to drift among the threads, touching the faint pulses with the edges of his consciousness. Each one carried echoes of ordinary moments imbued with quiet significance. He saw fragments of himself at different ages, hesitant, curious, uncertain, yet resilient. He saw Rick in forms that were softened, reflective, moments where care had been present even beneath impatience or chaos. Morty felt a warmth rise in his chest, the ache of recognition and gratitude that came from understanding the subtle impact of small gestures. A soft melody drifted through the void, though there was no wind. It was a composite of memories, his mother humming a lullaby, Rick muttering an explanation of something inconsequential, yet instructive, Summer's laughter trailing through hallways. Morty let the melody wash over him, absorbing the resonance of acknowledgement of life quietly witnessed and remembered. He realized that the void was teaching him to notice, to honor, and to carry awareness that presence alone could transform a life more profoundly than any overt act. He drifted toward a window suspended in the room, a pane of soft illumination. Beyond it, the void stretched endlessly, dotted with faint glimmers, each one a distant memory or act of care. Morty leaned close, feeling the faint warmth of each point of light. The glimmers formed a subtle lattice, connecting moments, people, and gestures across the endless space. Morty understood that even the smallest acts, spoken or unspoken, observed or overlooked, left echoes, ripples that extended far beyond immediate perception. Each thread mattered, each pulse was significant. Morty exhaled slowly, a long, gentle release, letting the warmth of recognition settle within him. He whispered softly, "Thank you for letting me be here." The lantern pulsed gently, threads of light shimmered in subtle harmony, and the void responded with a soft hum of acknowledgement. He felt profound calm settle over him, a quiet understanding that life's significance was not measured by grandeur or spectacle, but by attention, presence, and care extended through the smallest
gestures. He moved to the center of the room and curled into himself, letting the lantern float beside him like a heartbeat suspended in space.
The threads of light shimmered softly around him, pulsating gently with each exhalation. Morty thought of Rick, not in his usual chaotic form, but in the quiet moments he had taught, observed, or guided. He thought of Summer, whose insistence on being seen and acknowledged had grounded him in ways he had never admitted. He thought of his parents, whose small, unnoticed acts of care had built the scaffolding of his early years. The room felt alive in a way that was subtle but profound. Each object, each thread, each pulse of light was a testament to attention given and received. Morty understood now that these threads, though small, were the architecture of life, forming a lattice that supported, sustained, and nurtured. He exhaled again, letting the calm fill him completely, the ache of gratitude soft and tender in his chest. Somewhere in the soft shimmer of the void, Morty realized he was learning the essence of care, presence, acknowledgement, and attention without
expectation.
Life, he understood, was less about the grand or dramatic and more about these quiet threads, each act of noticing or being noticed leaving an imprint that extended far beyond the immediate moment. He felt a profound peace, a deepening calm.
As if the void itself had wrapped him in the quiet embrace of understanding. He whispered once more, barely audible, "Thank you."
"For letting me be here." The threads of light pulsed in quiet response. The lantern glowed steadily beside him, and the void hummed softly. Morty understood that even in the absence of spectacle or drama, life carried meaning through the smallest gestures, the quietest moments, and the most deliberate presence. And in that realization, he felt a steady warmth, a calm that would accompany him as he drifted further into the endless shimmer of memory and quiet understanding. And somewhere, in the gentle glow of the void, Morty realized that he was not merely drifting, but learning the quietest, truest form of wisdom, to witness, to acknowledge, to exist fully, and to hold space for others and for himself. In this subtle architecture of care, he felt a profound calm, the kind that settles deep within the chest, carrying the quiet assurance that presence, attention, and care are always enough. Morty floated through the void with a quiet steadiness, the lantern beside him glowing like a heartbeat made visible in the darkness. The expanse around him was still and infinite, yet it no longer felt empty. It was filled with soft pulses of light, gentle echoes of memory, and threads of care that intertwined in patterns he could not fully comprehend, but could feel deeply. Each step, each drift, carried with it the weight of reflection and acknowledgement, a rhythm that harmonized with the subtle hum of the void itself. Ahead, a faint glimmer beckoned, delicate and oscillating, like the last warmth of sunlight on a winter evening. Morty approached slowly, letting the lantern illuminate the edges
of the space.
As he drew nearer, the glimmer resolved into a small clearing suspended mid-air, its ground soft and textured like moss, but glowing faintly. In the center lay a stone bench, unadorned yet imbued with a quiet presence. Morty felt drawn to it, sensing that sitting here would allow him to witness more than just the visible space. It would allow him to witness the architecture of memory and care itself. He settled onto the bench, letting the lantern float gently beside him. Around him the clearing seemed to breathe, the soft glow pulsing in gentle waves. Each pulse carried fragments of memory, laughter, quiet conversations, small acts of kindness unnoticed at the time, moments of connection that had gone unremarked. Morty realized that the void had a way of magnifying subtle significance, making small, ordinary moments feel monumental and alive. He exhaled slowly, letting the warmth of recognition settle into his chest. As he observed the clearing, a faint figure emerged at its edge. Morty recognized it instantly, a younger version of himself, small and hesitant, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. The boy paused, unsure whether to approach, and Morty felt a soft ache in his chest. He did not move toward the boy. He did not speak in the usual sense. Instead, he allowed the lantern's glow to fall between them, creating a circle of gentle reassurance. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You're not alone." The boy blinked slowly, shoulders relaxing just a fraction. The void itself seemed to respond, carrying the quiet affirmation of acknowledgement the resonance of presence. Morty's gaze wandered across the clearing. Threads of light stretched from the bench to the edges of the clearing, each one pulsing faintly with life. They contained fragments of memory, moments when Rick had quietly offered guidance, when Summer had insisted on being noticed, when his parents had prepared meals or left small tokens of care. Morty traced them with his mind, feeling the warmth
of recognition ripple through him. The void seemed to whisper that even the smallest gestures, often overlooked, carried immense weight in the quiet architecture of life. He noticed subtle ripples in the glowing ground, faint arcs of light that moved like water.
Each ripple reflected fragments of his own life, mornings he had barely noticed, evenings spent reading, small accomplishments, fleeting moments of joy, and the tiny gestures of others that had held him steady. Morty realized that all of these moments were connected, woven into a lattice of presence, acknowledgement, and care. Even when unseen, these threads had sustained him, and their significance was amplified in the quiet resonance of the void. A gentle melody drifted through the clearing, faint but clear, though there was no wind. It carried fragments of his life, his mother humming softly, Rick muttering instructions, Summer's laughter echoing through empty corridors. Morty let the sound wash over him, feeling the resonance of each note in his chest. These were not songs to follow or messages to decipher. They were affirmations, quiet reminders that his life had been noticed, that he had been witnessed, that even the smallest acts mattered. He leaned back on the bench, closing his eyes briefly. The lantern pulsed steadily beside him, threads of light surrounding him, and the clearing hummed softly. Morty thought of Rick in moments of subtle patience, teaching without impatience, offering guidance without demand. He thought of Summer, whose insistence on being seen had grounded him. He thought of his parents, whose small, unnoticed gestures of care had built the scaffolding of his early years. And in this moment, Morty realized that every act of acknowledgement he had received had formed a quiet, invisible network, a support
structure that held him throughout time. The young version of himself approached slowly, tentative but curious.
Morty did not reach out, did not move toward him. He allowed the boy to exist in the light, letting the quiet glow provide reassurance. "I see you," he whispered again. "You are enough." The boy blinked, shoulders loosening slightly, a subtle exhale of relief escaping. Morty felt warmth pulse through him, recognizing the quiet power of being present, of witnessing without expectation. Threads of light continued to pulse around them, extending outward into the void. Morty traced them mentally, noticing the connections. They formed between moments, people, and gestures. Each pulse was an echo, a subtle affirmation that life mattered in the small details, that care and presence left lasting marks even when unnoticed. He understood now that the void was not merely a space to drift through, but a place to witness, to honor, and to absorb the quiet significance of life's smallest actions. Morty exhaled slowly, a deliberate, peaceful breath that carried the weight of understanding. He whispered softly into the void, "Thank you for letting me be here." The lantern pulsed gently. Threads of light shimmered in response, and the clearing seemed to hum with quiet acknowledgement. Morty felt a profound sense of calm settle into him, a gentle warmth that spoke of the quiet power of presence and recognition. He curled into himself on the bench, letting the lantern float beside him. The threads of light pulsed gently in rhythm with his exhalation, the clearing breathing softly around him. Morty thought of all the ways he had been noticed, acknowledged, and cared for, even in moments too small to recall consciously. He realized that these threads of attention and recognition had been forming a quiet structure throughout his life, a lattice that connected past, present, and future in subtle, powerful ways. Somewhere deep in the shimmer of the void, Morty felt the resonance of understanding settle fully. He was learning that care was not always loud, that acknowledgement did not always need words, that presence could be its own gift. The quiet acts of noticing, the deliberate attention, the gentle witnessing of others and oneself, all of it formed the essence of life's deepest significance. And in this understanding, Morty felt a steady, profound peace, a calm that reached deep into his chest and lingered, and lingered. He whispered once more, soft and low, "Thank you for letting me be here." The clearing shimmered gently in response, threads of light pulsing with warmth, and the lantern glowed steadily beside him. Morty understood that he was not merely drifting in the void. He was learning, in the most delicate and profound way, the quiet art of care, to witness, to acknowledge, and to hold space for others and for himself. In this subtle architecture of light and presence, he felt a deep, lasting calm, a gentle reassurance that even the smallest gestures of attention carried immense, enduring significance. Morty drifted gently through the void, the lantern floating beside him, radiating a soft warmth that felt like a heartbeat suspended in the darkness. The air, or something like it, was filled with faint echoes of life, delicate traces of laughter, whispered words, and quiet moments of care. Every step, every drift, carried a sense of intention, of presence, and Morty realized he no longer felt the emptiness that had once unsettled him. The void was a companion now, patient, observant, and quietly alive. Ahead, he noticed a faint glimmer, soft and rhythmic, like the pulse of distant stars. As he approached, the shimmer resolved into a small grove suspended mid-air, its ground dappled with gentle light that bent around invisible shapes. Trees with translucent trunks leaned toward one another, their branches forming delicate arches above a shallow pool of water that reflected faint glimmers of past memories. Morty felt drawn to the pool, sensing that it held reflections not only of what had been, but also of what had shaped him quietly and profoundly. He settled beside the pool, letting the lantern hover at eye level. The water shimmered softly, ripples moving in response to his presence. Within its depths, faint reflections of his life surfaced. Moments of laughter, quiet gestures of care, evenings spent observing the world, fragments of conversations that had carried unseen weight. Morty realized that even these seemingly small fragments had accumulated into a lattice of meaning, each echo a subtle pulse that sustained him and carried him forward. A delicate figure emerged from the shadows of the wall grove, familiar yet distant. Morty recognized it immediately. A younger version of himself, eyes wide with uncertainty, crouched near the edge of the pool. The boy hesitated, glancing toward Morty, unsure whether to approach. Morty allowed the lantern's glow to fall between them, forming a circle of warmth and reassurance. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You are not alone." The boy's shoulders relaxed imperceptibly, a subtle acknowledgement that presence alone could heal, that witnessing without expectation could transform. Threads of light stretched across the grove, delicate lines connecting the pool to the trees, and beyond into the void. Each thread pulsed faintly, carrying a memory or gesture, Rick explaining something with quiet patience, Summer laughing softly in the hallways, his parents' unnoticed acts of care. Morty traced the threads with his awareness, feeling the warmth of recognition ripple through him. The void seemed intent on showing him that life's smallest moments of attention and acknowledgement carried more weight than any dramatic or overt act could ever achieve. He leaned closer to the pool, noticing that the water's surface rippled in response to the memories it reflected. Each ripple carried fragments of ordinary life, mornings with the quiet hum of breakfast, afternoons spent reading or sketching, nights watching the stars with faint curiosity. Morty understood that the void was magnifying the quiet resonance of these moments, turning them into a subtle symphony of care and presence. Even the unnoticed acts, he realized, had left lasting marks echoing across time in ways too delicate to perceive in ordinary life. A gentle melody drifted through the grove, carried not by wind, but by resonance. It was a collage of remembered sounds, his mother humming softly, Rick's muttered explanations, Summer's laughter threading through the silence. Morty allowed the melody to fill him completely, feeling it settle in the spaces between his thoughts. The music was not a song to follow, nor a message to decipher. It was an affirmation that his life had been witnessed, that he had been held in subtle ways, that the smallest acts of care had mattered. The young version of himself approached the pool slowly, tentative, sensing reassurance in Morty's quiet presence. Morty did not move toward him, did not speak in the usual sense. He let the boy exist in the light of the lantern and the pool, letting warmth and acknowledgement radiate outward. "I see you," he whispered again, "and you are enough." The boy's shoulders eased, a faint exhale of relief drifting through the grove. Morty understood the profound, quiet power of being present, of witnessing life without expectation, of simply allowing someone to exist fully and safely in your awareness. Threads of light continued to pulse gently across the grove, stretching outward into the void, connecting trees, ripples in the water, and distant glimmers of memory. Morty followed them with his gaze, recognizing the subtle architecture of care that they formed. Each thread was an echo of life, a record of attention given and received. The void was teaching him that even moments too small to note in ordinary life created ripples that resonated far beyond immediate perception. Presence, acknowledgement, and care had their own enduring power. Morty exhaled slowly, a long, deliberate breath, carrying the warmth of understanding and gratitude. He whispered softly into the void, "Thank you for letting me be here." The lantern pulsed gently beside him, threads of light shimmered in response, and the grove seemed to hum softly in affirmation. A sense of calm settled fully within him, a steady warmth that reached deep into his chest, the realization that life's meaning often resided in subtle gestures, quiet attention, and the simple act of noticing. He drifted to the center of the bay, pool's edge curling gently into himself, the lantern hovering nearby. The threads of light shimmered softly around him, pulsating in harmony with the slow rhythm of his breath. Morty thought of Rick in softened, quiet fragments, moments where care had been present even under impatience. He thought of Summer, whose laughter and insistence on acknowledgement had grounded him. He thought of his parents, whose unnoticed gestures had formed the scaffolding of his early years. He realized that all these threads combined to create a lattice of quiet resilience and presence. The grove itself seemed alive, breathing softly with subtle arcs of illumination. Morty understood that the void was not merely a space to drift through, but a place to witness, absorb, and honor life's quiet architecture. Even the smallest moments, the simplest gestures, the faintest acknowledgments, these were the components of something enduring, a structure of care and presence that extended far beyond the visible. He exhaled again, letting the warmth and calm permeate him completely. Somewhere deep in the shimmer of the void, Morty felt a profound sense of understanding settle. He was learning the essence of care, witnessing, acknowledging, holding space without expectation. Life, he realized, was less about grand events or dramatic moments, and more about these subtle threads woven through time, attention, and presence. And in that realization, he felt steady, quiet peace, the kind that filled the chest and lingered, gentle and unshakable. He whispered one last time, soft and low, "Thank you for letting me be here." The grove shimmered gently in response, threads of light pulsing in subtle harmony, the lantern glowing steadily beside him. Morty understood that he was not merely drifting. He was learning, in the deepest and quietest way, the art of care, presence, acknowledgement, and attention, each act leaving a lasting imprint on the lattice of life. And in this understanding, he felt calm, warmth, and a steady reassurance that even the smallest gestures carried enduring significance. Morty drifted slowly through the void, lantern hovering beside him, its light steady and warm, like a heartbeat caught in the darkness. The air, or something that resembled air, was still, yet alive with faint echoes of memory. Whispers of laughter, fragments of conversations, and small gestures of care floated gently around him, like particles of light suspended in quiet motion. The vastness no longer felt empty. Instead, it held a subtle, patient presence that seemed to notice every detail, every ripple of thought, every tender fragment of memory. Ahead, a faint glow shimmered, beckoning softly. Morty approached, and the light resolved into a small platform suspended in the void. Its surface was smooth, almost glass-like, reflecting the lantern's glow in gentle waves. Around the edges, faint threads of light traced subtle patterns, like constellations of moments, small acts of care, gestures of attention. Morty felt drawn to the center of the platform, sensing that stepping there would allow him to witness the quiet architecture of life, the invisible threads that bound.
Memory, care, and presence together.
He settled in the center, letting the lantern hover beside him. The threads of light pulsed gently, each one carrying a fragment of his life. Mornings spent eating breakfast quietly, Rick muttering explanations, Summer's laughter echoing down, corridors, small acts of care left unnoticed, but felt nonetheless. Morty traced the lines with his mind, feeling warmth ripple through him. He realized that these subtle gestures, often overlooked, had accumulated into a lattice that had sustained him in ways he had not understood before. A delicate figure emerged from the periphery of the platform. Morty recognized it immediately, a younger version of himself, small, hesitant, and wide-eyed. The boy's posture was cautious, unsure whether to approach. Morty did not move toward him. Instead, he allowed the lantern's gentle glow to fall between them, creating a circle
Of warmth. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You are not alone." The boy's shoulders relaxed, a subtle exhale escaping him. The void itself seemed to respond, pulsing softly in acknowledgement, as though affirming the quiet significance of presence and witnessing. Threads of light continued to stretch across the platform, extending outward into the darkness.
Each thread carried a memory, moments when Rick had guided him gently, Summer's laughter and insistence on being acknowledged, small gestures from his parents that had built the scaffolding of his early years. Morty traced them, recognizing the intricate, invisible network of care that connected these moments. Even the most ordinary, unnoticed acts had profound weight when seen in this quiet, reflective space. He leaned closer to the edge of the platform, watching faint reflections ripple across the smooth surface. In them he saw fragments of ordinary life, evenings spent watching clouds, quiet walks in the park, small accomplishments that went uncelebrated. Morty understood that the void was amplifying these moments, turning them into constellations of meaning. Even the simplest gestures, preparing a meal, leaving a note, holding space, carried resonance, leaving echoes that extended far beyond immediate perception. A gentle melody drifted through the void, though there was no wind. It was composed of faint echoes, his mother humming softly, Rick muttering explanations, Summer's laughter threading through time. Morty let the sound fill him, settling between his thoughts. The melody was not a song to follow or a riddle to solve. It was a confirmation, a quiet assurance that life, in its subtleties, mattered. That even when unnoticed, moments of care left traces that persisted, forming a quiet foundation for presence and understanding. The young version of himself moved closer, tentative, sensing the warmth radiating from Morty and the lantern. Morty did not reach out, did not speak in any ordinary sense. He let the boy exist in the light, allowing him to feel acknowledged, seen, and enough. "I see you," he whispered again, "and you are enough." The boy blinked slowly, shoulders easing. A soft exhale of relief floated across the platform, a small testament to the transformative power of witnessing without expectation. Threads of light pulsed gently across the platform, connecting distant glimmers in the void to the edges of the platform and beyond. Morty followed them with his awareness, recognizing their delicate, intricate network. Each thread was an echo of life, a record of attention given and received, a quiet testimony that even the smallest gestures left lasting impressions. The dawn's void, he realized, existed to make him see and feel that presence, acknowledgement, and care were far more profound than dramatic or visible acts. Morty exhaled slowly, a long, deliberate breath carrying gratitude and calm. "Thank you for letting me be here," he whispered into the quiet. The lantern pulsed gently, threads of light shimmered in response, and the void hummed softly, affirming the resonance of his words. He felt warmth fill his chest, a quiet assurance that life's significance often lay in subtle, patient, deliberate attention and presence. The smallest gestures could sustain, nurture, and connect, leaving echoes that persisted beyond the moment. He drifted to the center of the platform and curled into himself, letting the lantern hover nearby. The threads of light shimmered softly, pulsing gently with the rhythm of his breath. Morty thought of Rick, in fragments softened by time, moments where care had been present beneath impatience or chaos. He thought of Summer, whose laughter and insistence on being seen had grounded him. He thought of his parents, whose small, unnoticed acts of attention had created the foundation of his early years. The platform seemed to breathe in response to his awareness, subtle arcs of light forming and dissolving gently around him. Morty understood that the void was not merely a space to drift through, but a space to witness, to honor, and to feel the quiet weight of life's architecture. Even unnoticed moments, subtle gestures, and fleeting acknowledgments contributed to an enduring structure of presence and care. He exhaled again, letting calm fill him completely, the quiet ache of recognition and gratitude softening his chest. Deep in the shimmer of the void, Morty felt understanding settle fully. He realized that care was not always loud. Acknowledgement did not require words, and presence alone could sustain. Life's significance was often hidden in subtle threads woven through attention, witnessing, and quiet observation. And in that understanding, he felt steady, gentle peace, a warmth that lingered, unshakable and profound. He whispered softly once more, "Thank you for letting me be here." The platform shimmered gently in response, threads of light pulsing in harmony, the lantern glowing steadily beside him. Morty understood he was not merely drifting. He was learning the quiet, enduring art of care, to witness, to acknowledge, to hold space, to notice without expectation. And in that understanding, he felt calm, warmth, and assurance that even the smallest gestures carried immense, lasting significance. Morty drifted slowly through the endless void, the lantern floating beside him like a heartbeat suspended in darkness. The space around him no longer felt empty, though it remained vast and quiet. Instead, it hummed faintly with echoes of memory, soft traces of laughter, whispered words, and small gestures of care. Every ripple, every pulse of light seemed to respond to his presence, acknowledging him in subtle, unspoken ways. The void had become a companion, patient and gentle, inviting him to observe and reflect without hurry or expectation. Ahead, a faint glimmer hovered, soft and wavering. Morty approached it slowly, allowing the lantern's light to mingle with the gentle pulse. The glow resolved into a suspended garden, delicate and serene, its edges undefined, like it had grown spontaneously in the void. Soft patches of luminescent moss covered the ground, and faintly glowing flowers swayed gently as though moved by a wind that did not exist. In the center, a small pond reflected the lantern's glow, its surface rippling with patterns that seemed to echo memories rather than water. Morty settled beside the pond, letting the lantern float nearby. He noticed that every movement in the water produced subtle arcs of light that traced invisible lines connecting flowers, moss, and distant glimmers of the void. The threads of light carried faint echoes, fragments of his past, moments of care, small acts that had been unnoticed but not lost. Morty realized that these threads were like veins, carrying life, memory, and acknowledgement across the expanse of time and space. Each ripple, each glow held significance beyond what he had ever
imagined. A delicate figure appeared near the pond's edge.
Morty recognized it immediately, a younger version of himself, eyes wide with curiosity and uncertainty. The boy hesitated, as though unsure whether to approach. Morty did not move toward him. He allowed the lantern's glow to fall between them, forming a gentle circle of warmth. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You are not alone." The boy's shoulders relaxed slightly, the tension of years dissolving in a quiet exhale. The void itself seemed to acknowledge the moment, pulsing softly in response. Threads of light stretched outward from the pond, weaving between moss patches, flowers, and distant glimmers of memory. Morty traced them with his mind, feeling the quiet warmth of recognition ripple through him. Each thread contained a fragment of care. Rick explaining something with patience, Summer's laughter echoing in the hallways, his parents' unnoticed gestures that had nurtured him in ways too subtle to name. Morty realized that even the smallest acts of attention, often overlooked, created patterns of connection that were enduring and profound. He leaned closer to the pond, watching the ripples form and dissolve. Each movement reflected fragments of ordinary life, quiet mornings, unremarkable conversations, moments of solitude, evenings spent observing the night sky. The void was amplifying these moments, showing him that significance was often hidden in the ordinary, in gestures too small to notice, in the rush of daily life. Even these fragments had contributed to a lattice of care and presence, forming the foundation of understanding and gratitude that now filled him. A soft melody drifted through the garden, though there was no wind. It was a collage of sounds from his past, his mother humming, Rick muttering explanations, Summer's laughter threading through empty spaces. Morty let it wash over him, feeling it settle in the quiet corners of his mind. It was not a song to follow, nor a riddle to solve. It was a gentle reminder that life had been witnessed, that acts of care, however small, had mattered, and that the quiet architecture of attention had always been present, supporting and sustaining him. The young version of himself moved closer to the pond, tentative and curious. Morty did not reach out or speak in conventional terms. He allowed the boy to exist in the glow of the lantern and the reflected light of the pond, allowing him to feel acknowledged and safe. "I see you," he whispered again, "and you are enough." The boy blinked, shoulders relaxing in a small exhale of relief. Morty felt warmth pulse through him, understanding the subtle power of presence, of witnessing without expectation, of simply allowing someone to exist fully and safely in awareness. Threads of light continued to pulse across the garden, connecting distant glimmers of memory to flowers, moss, and the surface of the pond. Morty traced them mentally, recognizing the invisible network they formed. Each thread was an echo, a record of attention given and received. Even the moments too small to notice in ordinary life left impressions that resonated across time and space. Morty realized that the void was not merely a space to drift, but a place to absorb, witness, and honor life's quiet, delicate architecture. Morty exhaled slowly, a long, deliberate breath carrying gratitude and calm.
"Thank you for letting me be here," he whispered. The lantern pulsed gently beside him. Threads of light shimmered in quiet harmony, and the void itself seemed to hum in response. A steady warmth filled his chest, a gentle reassurance
That life's significance often resided in subtle gestures, attention, and witnessing. Even the smallest moments of care could sustain and nurture, leaving echoes that endured far beyond immediate perception. He curled into himself beside the pond, letting the lantern hover nearby. Threads of light shimmered softly, pulsing gently, with the rhythm of his breath. Morty thought of Rick in quiet fragments, moments when care had been present beneath impatience. He thought of Summer, whose laughter and insistence on acknowledgement had grounded him. He thought of his parents, whose small, unnoticed acts of attention had formed the scaffolding of his early years. Morty realized that all these threads combined to create a lattice of quiet resilience, presence, and care. The garden seemed alive, breathing subtly, arcs of illumination forming and dissolving in gentle patterns. Morty understood that the void was teaching him to witness, to honor, and to absorb the quiet significance of life's smallest acts. Even unnoticed gestures and fleeting acknowledgments were part of a structure that extended far beyond the immediate. He exhaled again, letting calm settle fully, the ache of recognition softening his chest with warmth and understanding. Somewhere deep in the shimmer of the void, Morty felt a profound sense of understanding settle within him. He realized that care was not always loud, that acknowledgement did not need words, and that presence alone could sustain. Life's meaning often resided in subtle threads woven through attention, witnessing, and quiet observation. And in this realization he felt calm, a steady warmth, and reassurance that lingered, gentle and unshakable. He whispered softly, "Thank you for letting me be here." The garden shimmered gently in response, threads of light pulsing in. Harmony, the lantern glowing steadily beside him. Morty understood that he was not merely drifting in the void. He was learning the enduring, quiet art of care, to witness, to acknowledge, to hold space, to notice without expectation. In this understanding, he felt calm, warmth, and a quiet, steady reassurance that even the smallest gestures carried immense, lasting significance. Morty moved through the void with a gentle rhythm, the lantern beside him casting a soft, steady glow that seemed to pulse with his own breathing. The vast darkness, once daunting and empty, had transformed into a space rich with quiet presence. Light threads, faint and delicate, stretched endlessly, connecting glimmers of memory, subtle gestures of care and echoes of past moments. The void hummed softly, as if alive, responding to his awareness, acknowledging him with a patience that felt almost tender. Ahead, a dim shimmer caught his attention, wavering softly as though breathing. Morty drifted closer and discovered a suspended glade, its edges indistinct, floating weightlessly in the expanse. The ground was soft with luminescent moss, and delicate flowers leaned gently toward invisible currents. In the center lay a small pool of water, its surface reflecting the lantern's glow, rippling in patterns that mirrored fragments of memory. Morty sensed that the pool carried more than reflection. It held the resonance of life itself, quietly, amplifying moments often overlooked. He settled beside the pool, letting the lantern hover gently near him. Each ripple in the water seemed to contain a fragment of his past, quiet mornings filled with breakfast, hushed conversations, afternoons spent in thought, evenings watching clouds drift across the sky. He saw Rick's subtle guidance, Summer's insistence on acknowledgement, his parents' gentle acts of care that had formed a scaffold for his early years. Morty realized that even the smallest gestures had left enduring imprints, threads of presence and attention that wove a lattice. Across time, a faint figure appeared near the pool's edge. Morty recognized it immediately. A younger version of himself, small and hesitant, eyes wide with uncertainty. The boy paused, seeming unsure whether to approach. Morty did not move toward him. He simply allowed the lantern's glow to fall between them, forming a circle of warmth. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You are not alone." The boy exhaled slowly, shoulders easing as the quiet acknowledgement of presence wrapped around him. The void itself seemed to pulse with soft resonance, affirming the subtle, transformative power of being seen. Threads of light stretched outward from the pool, weaving between the moss, flowers, and distant glimmers of memory in the void. Morty traced them with his awareness, sensing the faint warmth of recognition ripple through him. Each thread carried a memory. Rick explaining something with patient care, Summer's laughter echoing in the hallways, moments of quiet attention from his parents that had gone unacknowledged but left enduring significance. The void showed him that these subtle, often overlooked gestures formed the foundation of life's quiet architecture, a lattice of care and presence that endured far beyond the immediate. He leaned closer to the pool, observing the ripples form and dissipate. Each one carried fragments of ordinary life, the soft hum of a mother's lullaby, the muted sounds of Rick's explanations, Summer's laughter drifting through an empty house. Morty realized that the void magnified these moments, transforming them into constellations of meaning. Even seemingly inconsequential acts carried resonance, creating a network of connection that held him steady in ways he had never consciously recognized. A gentle melody drifted through the glade, though there was no wind. It was a composite of remembered sounds, a collage of memory and care, his mother's humming, Rick's muttered instructions, Summer's laughter threading through time. Morty let it wash over him, feeling the resonance settle in the quiet spaces
of his mind. The melody was not a song to follow or a puzzle to solve.
It was a confirmation, a soft acknowledgement that life had been witnessed, that moments of care, however small, mattered deeply, and that subtle attention formed the foundation of enduring connection. The younger version of himself approached, the pool, tentative, drawn by the lantern's light and the soft hum of presence. Morty did not reach out or speak in the conventional sense. He allowed the boy to exist fully in the glow of the lantern and the reflective pool.
"I see you," he whispered again, "and you are enough." The boy blinked, shoulders loosening, a faint exhale escaping him. Morty felt warmth pulse through his chest, recognizing the profound quiet power of being present, of witnessing.
Without expectation, and of simply allowing someone to exist safely and fully in your awareness. Threads of light continued to pulse across the glade, connecting flowers, moss, the pool, and distant glimmers of memory in the void. Morty traced them with his awareness, recognizing the intricate lattice they formed. Each thread was an echo, a record of attention given and received. Even the moments too small to notice in ordinary life left lasting impressions that resonated across space and time. The void was teaching him that significance resided not in grand gestures, but in subtle acts of care, attention, and presence. Morty exhaled slowly, letting the warmth of understanding settle deep within him.
"Thank you for letting me be here," he whispered softly. The lantern pulsed gently beside him. Threads of light shimmered in quiet response, and the glade seemed to hum softly in affirmation. A gentle calm spread through him, a steady
warmth that filled his chest and lingered. He understood that life's meaning was often hidden in small gestures, in attention given and received, in acknowledgement without expectation. Even tiny acts of care could sustain, nurture, and create enduring connection. He curled into himself beside the pool, letting the lantern hover nearby. The threads of light shimmered softly, pulsing gently with the rhythm of his breath. Morty thought of Rick, in moments softened by time, when care had been present beneath impatience and chaos. He thought of Summer, whose laughter and insistence on acknowledgement had grounded him. He thought of his parents, whose quiet acts of attention had formed the unseen scaffolding of his early years. Morty realized that all these threads combined to form a lattice of quiet resilience, presence, and care. The glade itself seemed to breathe subtly, arcs of illumination forming and dissolving in gentle patterns. Morty understood that the void was not merely a space to drift, but a place to witness, absorb, and honor life's quiet architecture. Even unnoticed gestures and fleeting acknowledgements were part of a structure that extended far beyond the immediate. He exhaled again, letting calm and recognition fill him completely, the quiet ache in his chest softening into warmth. Somewhere deep in the shimmer of the void, Morty felt a profound sense of understanding settle fully. He realized that care did not need to be loud, acknowledgement did not require words, and presence alone could sustain life. Meaning resided in subtle threads woven through attention, witnessing, and quiet observation. And in this realization, he felt calm, warmth, and a reassurance that lingered quietly, gentle and unshakable. He whispered softly one last time, "Thank you for letting me be here." The glade shimmered gently in response, threads of light pulsing in quiet harmony, the lantern glowing steadily beside him. Morty understood that he was learning the enduring, subtle art of care, to witness, to acknowledge, to hold space, to notice without expectation. And in that understanding, he felt calm, warmth, and a quiet reassurance that even the smallest gestures carried immense, lasting significance. Morty drifted through the void, the lantern hovering beside him, casting a warm, steady glow. The vast emptiness, once so daunting, had softened into something intimate, alive with quiet traces of memory and care. Faint echoes of laughter, whispered words, and subtle gestures floated around him, each pulse of light resonating with a history he had felt but seldom recognized. The void was no longer a space to escape. It had become a place to understand, to witness, and to feel the invisible architecture of presence that ran through his life. Ahead, a soft glimmer caught his eye, shimmering in gentle arcs. Morty moved toward it, lantern illuminating the edges of the glow. The light revealed a small grove, suspended in space, its floor covered with soft, luminescent moss. Delicate flowers leaned toward unseen currents, swaying gently in rhythms. Morty could feel more than see. At the center of the grove lay a shallow pond, its surface reflective yet shimmering, capturing fragments of his own life like ripples in memory. Morty sensed that this pond was a repository not only of reflection, but of quiet resonance, the subtle acknowledgement of all the small, overlooked moments that had sustained him. He settled beside the pond, letting the lantern float near him. The ripples in the water shifted gently, revealing fragments of his past, mornings with breakfast quietly shared, afternoons spent observing clouds or thinking hushed conversations, moments of solitude. Each reflection carried traces of Rick's patient explanations, Summer's persistent laughter and insistence on being noticed, and his parents' quiet gestures of care. Morty realized that even the tiniest acts of attention had accumulated into a lattice of meaning, threads of presence that stretched across time and space, binding him to life in ways he had only begun to comprehend. A faint figure appeared at the edge of the grove. Morty recognized him immediately, a younger version of himself, small and tentative, eyes wide with wonder and hesitation. The boy paused, uncertain whether to approach. Morty did not move toward him. He allowed the lantern's gentle glow to fall between them, forming a soft circle of warmth. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You are not alone." The boy exhaled slowly, shoulders easing, as if the quiet acknowledgement of presence had already begun to settle into him. The void itself pulsed faintly, echoing the recognition and care that flowed through the space. Threads of light stretched outward from the pond, weaving between moss, flowers, and distant glimmers in the void. Morty traced them with his awareness, feeling warmth ripple through him. Each thread contained a fragment of life, Rick guiding with subtle patience, Summer's laughter threading through silence, small gestures of his parents that had formed the scaffolding of his early years. Morty realized that even the simplest, most unnoticed actions carried profound resonance when considered as part of a greater, interconnected whole. He leaned closer to the pond, watching the ripples shift and settle. Reflections surfaced. Quiet. Mornings filled with breakfast, muted afternoons, fleeting conversations, evenings spent watching stars drift slowly across the sky. Morty felt the subtle power of these moments, amplified in the void, transformed into constellations of significance. The smallest gestures, the moments of care and acknowledgement too slight to notice at the time, had quietly shaped the lattice of his life. Each thread was a testament to the quiet endurance of presence, connection, and attention. A gentle melody drifted through the grove, not carried by wind, but resonating in the space itself. It was a composite of remembered sounds. His mother humming softly, Rick's murmured explanations, Summer's laughter threading through empty rooms. Morty let it wash over him, feeling the resonance settle in the quiet recesses of his mind. The melody was not a song to follow nor a puzzle to solve. It was an affirmation, a confirmation that even the smallest gestures of care, unnoticed and fleeting, mattered profoundly, leaving subtle, enduring impressions in the tapestry of life. The young version of himself moved closer to the pond, tentative but drawn to the glow. Morty did not reach out, did not speak in conventional terms. He allowed the boy to exist fully in the reflected light, letting him feel safe, acknowledged, and enough. "I see you," Morty whispered again, "and you are enough." The boy blinked, shoulders relaxing as a faint exhale escaped him. Morty felt warmth pulse through his chest, recognizing the quiet but profound power of presence, of witnessing without expectation, and of allowing someone to exist fully and safely within awareness. Threads of light continued to pulse across the grove, connecting distant memories, moss, flowers, and reflections in the pond. Morty traced them mentally, recognizing the invisible lattice of connection they formed. Each thread was an echo, a record of attention given and received. Even the moments too small to notice in ordinary life left impressions that resonated, far beyond immediate perception. The void was teaching him that significance often resided in subtle acts, quiet attention, and patient witnessing rather than in grand gestures or dramatic events. Morty exhaled slowly, letting the warmth of understanding settle deep within him. "Thank you for letting me be here," he whispered. The lantern pulsed gently, threads of light shimmered in quiet response, and the grove seemed to hum softly, affirming the resonance of his words. A gentle calm spread through him, a steady warmth that filled his chest and lingered. He understood that the deepest significance in life was often hidden in small gestures, deliberate attention, and quiet acknowledgement. Even subtle acts of care could sustain and nurture, leaving ripples that endured. He curled into himself beside the pond, letting the lantern hover nearby. Threads of light shimmered softly, pulsing in harmony with the rhythm of his breathing. Morty thought of Rick in softened, gentle fragments, moments when care had been present beneath impatience. He thought of Summer, whose laughter and insistence on acknowledgement had grounded him. He thought of his parents, whose quiet gestures had formed the unseen scaffolding of his early years. Morty understood that all these threads together created a lattice of quiet resilience, presence, and care that extended across time and space. The grove seemed alive, breathing subtly, arcs of illumination forming and dissolving in gentle patterns. Morty understood that the void was not merely a space to drift through, but a place to witness, absorb, and honor the subtle architecture of life. Even unnoticed gestures and fleeting acknowledgments contributed to a structure that extended far beyond the immediate moment. He exhaled again, letting calm and recognition fill him completely, warmth settling into the quiet spaces of his chest. Somewhere deep in the shimmer of the void, Morty felt understanding settle fully. He realized that care did not need to be loud, acknowledgement did not require words, and presence alone could sustain life. The meaning of life was often hidden in subtle threads, woven through attention, witnessing, and quiet observation. In this realization, he felt calm, a gentle, steady warmth and reassurance that lingered quietly, unshakable and soft. Soft, he whispered softly, one last time. Thank you for letting me be here. The grove shimmered in response, threads of light pulsing in quiet harmony, the lantern glowing steadily beside him. Morty understood he was learning the enduring, subtle art of care, to witness, to acknowledge, to hold space, and to notice without expectation. And in that understanding he felt calm, warmth, and a quiet reassurance that even the smallest gestures carried profound and lasting significance. Morty drifted through the void with a slow, deliberate rhythm, the lantern beside him casting a warm, steady light that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. The darkness around him was no longer empty. It held echoes of memory, whispers of laughter, faint gestures of care, and subtle threads of presence that wove themselves invisibly across the expanse. Each pulse of light, each gentle ripple, responded to his awareness, acknowledging him with quiet patience, a steady affirmation of the quiet resilience that had always accompanied him, even in moments he had not noticed. Ahead, a soft shimmer caught his attention, flickering like a far-off memory. Morty drifted toward it, the lantern illuminating the edges of the glow, revealing a suspended meadow, weightless in the void. The floor was carpeted with soft, luminescent moss, and delicate flowers leaned toward invisible currents, swaying gently as though following a rhythm too subtle for ordinary perception. In the center of the meadow lay a shallow pond, its surface reflecting the lantern's light in delicate, fluid patterns. Morty sensed that the pond held more than mere reflection. It held resonance, an echo of moments, gestures, and connections that had shaped him quietly, profoundly, across time. He settled at the edge of the pond, letting the lantern hover near him. The surface rippled gently, revealing fragments of his life. Mornings spent with quiet breakfasts, afternoons lost in thought, muted conversations, evenings watching the sky drift slowly from light to darkness. Each reflection carried traces of Rick's guidance, Summer's persistent laughter, and his parents' small gestures of care. Morty realized that even the smallest, unnoticed acts had formed threads that connected moments of significance, building a lattice of presence and attention that endured across time and space. A delicate figure emerged near the edge of the pond. Morty recognized him immediately. A younger version of himself, small and hesitant, eyes wide with curiosity and uncertainty. The boy paused, unsure whether to approach, sensing the weight of the quiet space. Morty did not move toward him. He allowed the lantern's glow to fall between them, forming a gentle circle of warmth. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You are not alone." The boy exhaled slowly, shoulders easing as recognition settled over him. The void pulsed faintly, echoing the quiet affirmation that presence, simply given, could heal and sustain. Threads of light stretched outward from the pond, weaving between flowers, moss, and distant glimmers in the void. Morty traced them with his awareness, feeling warmth ripple through him. Each thread carried memory. Rick's patient guidance, Summer's laughter threading through silence, the unnoticed gestures of his parents that had formed a hidden scaffold. Morty realized that even the most subtle actions, overlooked in the ordinary flow of life, had left lasting resonance. The void showed him the quiet, enduring power of attention, of acknowledgement, of being present without expectation. He leaned closer to the pond, observing ripples that moved and shimmered with the fragments of ordinary life. Quiet mornings, fleeting conversations, the sound of a humming mother, Rick's soft mutterings, Summer's persistent, joyous laughter. Morty understood that the void amplified these moments, transforming them into constellations of meaning. Even the simplest gestures carried profound significance, contributing to the delicate, invisible architecture of care and connection that sustained him. A gentle melody drifted through the meadow, not carried by wind, but resonating in the space itself. It was a collage of sounds from his past, his mother humming, Rick's explanations, Summer's laughter threading through empty halls. Morty let the melody wash over him, feeling it settle in quiet corners of his mind. The song was not a riddle or something to follow. It was a quiet confirmation, a soft acknowledgement that life had been witnessed, that the smallest gestures of care had mattered, leaving lasting traces in the lattice of presence that surrounded him. The younger version of himself approached the pond, hesitant but drawn toward the glow. Morty did not reach out or speak conventionally. He allowed the boy to exist fully in the reflected light, letting him feel safe, acknowledged, and enough. "I see you," he whispered again, "and you are enough." The boy blinked, shoulders loosening, exhaling faintly. Morty felt warmth pulse through his chest, recognizing the quiet, transformative power of being present and bearing witness without expectation, simply allowing someone to exist fully and safely in awareness. Threads of light continued to pulse gently across the meadow, connecting flowers, moss, the pond, and distant glimmers in the void. Morty traced them with his awareness, observing the invisible lattice of connection they formed. Each thread was an echo of life, a record of attention given and received. Even moments too small to notice in ordinary life left lasting impressions that resonated beyond immediate perception. The void was teaching him that significance often resided in subtle acts, quiet attention, and patient presence rather than dramatic gestures or visible achievement. Morty exhaled slowly, letting the warmth of understanding settle deep within him. "Thank you for letting me be here," he whispered. The lantern pulsed gently, threads of light shimmered in quiet response, and the meadow seemed to hum softly, affirming the resonance of his words. A gentle, steady warmth spread through him, filling his chest. He understood that life's deepest meaning often lay hidden in subtle, deliberate acts, in acknowledgement without expectation, and in the quiet attention we give to one another. Even the smallest gestures could sustain, nurture, and ripple far beyond the moment. He curled into himself beside the pond, letting the lantern hover near. Threads of light shimmered softly, pulsing with his breathing. Morty thought of Rick, in moments softened by time, when care had been present beneath impatience and chaos. He thought of Summer, whose laughter and insistence on acknowledgement had grounded him. He thought of his parents, whose quiet, unnoticed gestures had created the unseen scaffolding of his early years. Morty understood that all these threads, together, formed a lattice of quiet resilience, presence, and care that extended across time and space. The meadow seemed alive, breathing subtly, arcs of light forming and dissolving in gentle patterns. Morty understood that the void was not merely a place to drift through, but a space to witness, absorb, and honor life's delicate architecture. Even unnoticed gestures and fleeting acknowledgments contributed to a structure that extended far beyond the immediate. He exhaled again, letting calm, recognition, and warmth fill him completely, settling into the quiet spaces of his chest. Somewhere deep in the shimmer of the void, Morty felt understanding settle fully. He realized that care did not need to be,
Loud acknowledgement did not require words, and presence alone could sustain life. Meaning resided in subtle threads woven through attention, witnessing, and quiet observation.
In this realization, he felt calm, a gentle warmth that lingered, steady, unshakable, and soft. He whispered softly, one last time, "Thank you for letting me be here." The meadow shimmered in response, threads of light pulsing in quiet harmony, the lantern glowing steadily beside him. Morty understood that he was learning the enduring, subtle art of care, to witness, to acknowledge, to hold space, to notice without expectation. And in that understanding, he felt calm, warmth, and quiet reassurance that even the smallest gestures carried lasting significance. Morty drifted gently through the void, the lantern floating beside him, casting a steady glow that illuminated the subtle ripples of memory and care surrounding him. The darkness, once vast and intimidating, had softened into something alive with quiet echoes, faint laughter, whispered words, and delicate threads of attention that stretched endlessly, unseen but deeply felt. Each pulse of light, each shimmering thread, seemed to acknowledge him with gentle patience, affirming the quiet, enduring presence that had always accompanied him, even when unnoticed. Ahead, a soft shimmer beckoned, flickering like a memory,
half-remembered. Morty drifted toward it, the lantern illuminating the edges of the glow, revealing a floating glade suspended in the void.
The ground was soft with luminescent moss, and delicate flowers leaned toward invisible currents, swaying as though moved by a rhythm too subtle for ordinary perception. At the center of the glade lay a small pond, its surface reflecting the lantern's glow in rippling, fluid patterns. Morty sensed that the pond held more than reflection. It carried resonance, the quiet acknowledgement of moments and gestures that had shaped him subtly, profoundly across time. He settled at the edge of the pond, letting the lantern hover nearby. The ripples in the water shifted gently, revealing fragments of his life. Quiet mornings with breakfast, afternoons spent thinking or observing clouds, fleeting conversations, evenings watching the stars. Each reflection carried traces of Rick's guidance, Summer's laughter, and insistence on acknowledgement, and his parents' subtle acts of care. Morty realized that even the smallest gestures, overlooked in the rush of daily life, had accumulated into a lattice of meaning, threads of presence stretching across time and space. A delicate figure appeared at the pond's edge. Morty recognized him immediately. A younger version of himself, small and hesitant, eyes wide with curiosity and
uncertainty. The boy paused, unsure whether to approach, sensing the quiet weight of the space. Morty did not move toward him.
He allowed the lantern's gentle glow to fall between them, forming a circle of warmth. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You are not alone." The boy exhaled slowly, shoulders easing as the quiet acknowledgement of presence settled
over him. The void itself pulsed softly in response, echoing the transformative power of witnessing without expectation. Threads of light stretched outward from the pond, weaving between moss, flowers, and distant glimmers in the void.
Morty traced them with his awareness, feeling warmth ripple through him. Each thread contained a memory. Rick guiding with subtle patience, Summer's laughter threading through silence, and the unnoticed gestures of his parents that had formed a hidden scaffold. Morty realized that even the most inconspicuous acts had left lasting resonance. The void was teaching him that attention, acknowledgement, and simple presence could shape life in ways more enduring than dramatic or visible achievements. He leaned closer to the pond, observing the ripples shift and dissolve. Reflections surfaced, quiet mornings, brief conversations, the faint hum of his mother's song, Rick's muttered explanations, Summer's persistent joy. Morty understood that the void magnified these moments, transforming them into constellations of meaning. Even the simplest gestures carried profound significance, forming an invisible architecture of care and connection that had always been present, patiently sustaining him. A gentle melody drifted through the glade, though no wind moved. It was a composite of sounds from his past, his mother humming softly, Rick's explanations, Summer's laughter threading through empty rooms. Morty let it wash over him, feeling it settle in quiet corners of his mind. The melody was not a puzzle or a song to follow. It was a quiet confirmation, a reminder that life had been witnessed, and that even small, unnoticed gestures of care left enduring imprints on the lattice of life. The younger version of himself moved closer to the pond, drawn by the glow. Morty did not reach out or speak in conventional terms. He allowed the boy to exist fully in the reflected light, letting him feel safe, acknowledged, and enough.
"I see you," he whispered again. "And you are enough." The boy blinked, shoulders relaxing, releasing a faint exhale. Morty felt warmth pulse through his chest, recognizing the quiet, transformative power of being present, witnessing,
without expectation, and allowing someone to exist fully in awareness. Threads of light pulsed gently across the glade, connecting flowers, moss, the pond, and distant memories. Morty traced them with his awareness, noting the invisible lattice they formed. Each thread was an echo, a record of attention given and received. Even moments too small to notice in daily life left lasting impressions that resonated far beyond immediate perception. The void was teaching him that significance often resided in subtle acts, quiet attention, and patient presence rather than dramatic gestures or visible achievement. Morty exhaled slowly, letting warmth settle deep within him. "Thank you for letting me be here," he whispered. The lantern pulsed gently, threads of light shimmered in quiet response, and the glade seemed to hum softly, affirming the resonance of his words. A gentle warmth spread through him, filling his chest. He understood that life's meaning was often hidden in subtle gestures, deliberate attention, and quiet acknowledgement. Even the smallest acts of care could sustain, nurture, and ripple across time. He curled into himself beside the pond, letting the lantern hover nearby. Threads of light shimmered softly, pulsing with his breath. Morty thought of Rick in moments, softened by time, when care had been present beneath impatience and chaos. He thought of Summer, whose laughter and insistence on acknowledgement had grounded him. He thought of his parents, whose quiet gestures had formed the unseen scaffolding of his early years. Morty understood that all these threads together created a lattice of quiet resilience, presence, and care that extended across time and space. The glade seemed alive, breathing subtly, arcs of light forming and dissolving in gentle patterns. Morty understood that the void was not merely a space to drift through, but a space to witness, absorb, and honor the delicate architecture of life. Even unnoticed gestures and fleeting acknowledgments contributed to a structure that extended far beyond the immediate. He exhaled again, letting calm, recognition, and warmth fill him completely, the quiet ache of memory softening into gentle assurance. Somewhere deep in the shimmer of the void, Morty felt understanding settle fully. He realized that care did not need to be loud, acknowledgement did not require words, and presence alone could sustain life. The meaning of life often resided in subtle threads woven through attention, witnessing, and quiet observation. In this realization, he felt calm, a gentle warmth that lingered, steady, unshakable, and soft. He whispered softly, one last time, "Thank you for letting me be here." The glade shimmered in response, threads of light pulsing in quiet harmony, the lantern glowing steadily beside him. Morty understood he was learning the enduring, subtle art of care, to witness, to acknowledge, to hold space, to notice without expectation. And in that understanding, he felt calm, warmth, and quiet reassurance that even the smallest gestures carried profound and lasting significance. Morty floated through the void, the lantern beside him casting a warm, steady glow. The darkness no longer felt empty or cold. It was a living space of memory, presence, and gentle resonance. Every flicker of light seemed to breathe with him, echoing laughter, whispers, and the small, unnoticed gestures that had quietly shaped his life. Each pulse, each thread of illumination felt like a heartbeat, a subtle acknowledgement that even the tiniest acts of care endured, stretching across time and space. Ahead, a soft shimmer caught his attention, wavering like a half-remembered dream. Morty drifted closer, the lantern illuminating the contours of a floating glade suspended weightlessly in the void. The floor was soft with glowing moss, and delicate flowers leaned toward invisible currents, swaying gently as though following rhythms too subtle for ordinary perception. In the center of the glade lay a shallow pond, its surface reflective yet alive with gentle ripples. Morty sensed that the water carried more than reflection. It held resonance, the quiet acknowledgement of every tender, fleeting gesture that had shaped him profoundly over time. He settled at the pond's edge, letting the lantern float nearby. The ripples shifted gently, revealing fragments of his life. Quiet mornings, small conversations, afternoons lost in thought, evenings watching clouds drift across the sky. Each reflection carried traces of Rick's patient guidance, summers, laughter threading through silence, and the subtle, unnoticed acts of care from his parents. Morty realized that even the smallest gestures had accumulated into a network of meaning, threads of presence that quietly bound moments together, weaving a lattice of connection across time and space. A faint figure appeared near the pond's edge. Morty recognized him immediately, a younger version of himself, small and hesitant, eyes wide with curiosity and uncertainty. The boy paused, unsure whether to approach. Morty did not move toward him. Instead, he allowed the lantern's glow to fall between them, forming a gentle circle of warmth. "I see you," he whispered softly. "You are not alone." The boy exhaled slowly, shoulders easing as the quiet acknowledgement of presence settled over him. The void itself pulsed faintly in response, affirming the transformative power of simply witnessing without expectation. Threads of light extended outward from the pond, weaving between moss, flowers, and distant glimmers of memory. Morty traced them with his awareness, feeling warmth ripple through him. Each thread carried a fragment of life, Rick's subtle guidance, Summer's persistent laughter, and the overlooked gestures of his parents that had formed a hidden scaffold. Morty realized that even the smallest actions, unnoticed in the flow of daily life, had left lasting resonance. The void was teaching him that attention, acknowledgement, and presence could quietly shape existence in ways more enduring than dramatic or visible achievements. He leaned closer to the pond, observing the ripples shift and shimmer. Reflections surfaced, quiet mornings, brief conversations, the faint hum of his mother's song, Rick's muttered explanations, Summer's persistent, joyous laughter. Morty understood that the void amplified these moments, transforming them into constellations of meaning. Even the smallest gestures carried profound significance, forming an invisible architecture of care and connection that had always been present, patiently sustaining him. A gentle melody drifted through the glade, though no wind stirred it. It was a collage of sounds from his past, his mother humming softly, Rick's explanations, Summer's laughter threading through empty rooms. Morty let it wash over him, feeling it settle in quiet corners of his mind. The song was not a puzzle or a narrative to follow. It was a soft confirmation, a quiet acknowledgement that life had been witnessed, that even small, unnoticed gestures of care had left enduring traces in the lattice of presence that surrounded him. The younger version of himself approached the pond, hesitant but drawn toward the glow. Morty did not reach out or speak in conventional terms. He allowed the boy to exist fully in the reflected light, letting him feel safe, acknowledged,
"And enough. I see you," he whispered again. "And you are enough." The boy blinked, shoulders relaxing, releasing a faint exhale. Morty felt warmth pulse through his chest, recognizing the quiet, transformative power of being present, witnessing
without expectation, and allowing someone to exist fully in awareness. Threads of light pulsed gently across the glade, connecting flowers, moss, the pond, and distant memories. Morty traced them mentally, observing the invisible lattice they formed. Each thread was an echo of life, a record of attention given and received. Even moments too small to notice in ordinary life left lasting impressions that resonated far beyond immediate perception. The void was teaching him that significance often resided in subtle acts, quiet attention, and patient presence rather than dramatic gestures or visible achievement. Morty exhaled slowly, letting warmth settle deep within him. "Thank you for letting me be here," he whispered. The lantern pulsed gently, threads of light shimmered in quiet response, and the glade seemed to hum softly, affirming the resonance of his words. A gentle warmth spread through him, filling his chest. He understood that life's meaning was often hidden in subtle gestures, deliberate attention, and quiet acknowledgement. Even the smallest acts of care could sustain, nurture, and ripple across time. He curled into himself beside the pond, letting the lantern hover nearby. Threads of light shimmered softly, pulsing with his breath. Morty thought of Rick in moments, softened by time when care had been present beneath impatience and chaos. He thought of Summer, whose laughter and insistence on acknowledgement had grounded him. He thought of his parents, whose quiet gestures had formed the unseen scaffolding of his early years. Morty understood that all these threads together created a lattice of quiet resilience, presence, and care that extended across time and space. The glade seemed alive, breathing subtly, arcs of light forming and dissolving in gentle patterns. Morty understood that the void was not merely a space to drift through, but a space to witness, absorb, and honor the delicate architecture of life. Even unnoticed gestures and fleeting acknowledgments contributed to a structure that extended far beyond the immediate. He exhaled again, letting calm, recognition, and warmth fill him completely, settling into the quiet spaces of his chest. Somewhere deep in the shimmer of the void, Morty felt understanding settle fully. He realized that care did not need to be loud, acknowledgement did not require words, and presence alone could sustain life. The meaning of life often resided in subtle threads woven through attention, witnessing, and quiet observation. In this realization, He felt calm, a gentle warmth that lingered, steady, unshakable and soft. He whispered softly, one last time, "Thank you for letting me be here." The glade shimmered in response, threads of light pulsing in quiet harmony, the lantern glowing steadily beside him. Morty understood he was learning the enduring, subtle art of care, to witness, to acknowledge, to hold space, to notice without expectation. And in that understanding, he felt calm, warmth, and quiet reassurance that even the smallest gestures carried profound and lasting significance. And so, Morty drifts gently through the quiet void, threads of memory and care stretching endlessly around him. The lantern's glow pulses softly, reflecting the subtle, enduring warmth of moments often unnoticed, gestures often overlooked, and love quietly given. Each ripple, each glimmer is a gentle reminder that even the smallest acts carry lasting significance, and that presence, attention, and care weave the invisible lattice of life. He moves through this vast, soft space without hurry, each step a meditation, each breath a quiet acknowledgement of the lives that touched him, the laughter, the whispered words, and the tender, fleeting gestures that formed the scaffolding of his days. And though the void stretches endlessly, it is not empty. It is full of quiet resonance, a soft hum of continuity, presence, and connection. Somewhere, Morty pauses, looking toward distant, shimmering threads. He smiles softly, a memory of love and care rippling through him, and feels the quiet fulfillment of understanding life's subtle architecture. He stretches into the warmth of the void, the lantern floating gently beside him, and rests in the calm knowledge that even in silence, he is never truly alone. Thanks for spending this time with
us. Sleep well. Everything's going to be okay, man.